The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep hues of orange and purple. Sam, Carter wiped her hands on her jeans, a faint smear of grease from the truck's oil change still staining her fingers. She leaned against the hood of her car, waiting for the gas pump to finish. Beside her, Emma Miller stretched her legs, the worn leather of her boots scuffing the pavement. The two women, best friends since childhood, had planned this road trip to escape the grind of their everyday lives. But tonight, something felt off. The rumble of motorcycles broke the stillness of the quiet gas station. Sam glanced up, spotting a group of 6 men riding in on chrome-plated beasts, their leather jackets glinting under the flickering neon sign. The lead biker, a burly man with a scar slicing across his cheek, dismounted first, his boots crunching on the gravel. He scanned the parking lot like he owned it, his eyes landing on Sam and Emma. Emma stiffened. "This can't be good," she murmured under her breath. "Just keep calm," Sam replied, her voice steady, though her fingers unconsciously curled into fists. The bikers sauntered toward them, their movements slow, deliberate. The lead biker, whose jacket bore the name Iron, grinned as he stopped a few feet away. Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Couple of lost little ladies?" Sam straightened, meeting his gaze head-on. "Just passing through. We're not looking for trouble." Iron chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble?" He stepped closer, invading Sam's space. "We're just being friendly. Ain't that right, boys?" The other bikers laughed, their voices echoing through the otherwise empty station. Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We're not interested. Why don't you guys just go on your way?" Iron's grin vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Now, that's not very nice, sweetheart." He reached out, his fingers aiming for Emma's shoulder. Before he could touch her, Emma moved. In one fluid motion, she grabbed his wrist, twisted it sharply, and shoved him backward. Iron stumbled, caught off guard. The laughter died instantly. "You've got some nerve, don't you?" Iron growled, his face darkening. Sam stepped beside Emma, her voice low and firm. "Walk away. Now." The tension crackled like static electricity, the bikers closing ranks around their leader. One of them, a wiry man with a snake tattoo coiling around his neck, lunged forward, aiming for Sam. She sidestepped him easily, her elbow connecting with his ribs. The man doubled over, cursing. Another biker rushed Emma, but she spun on her heel, her boot catching him squarely in the knee. He yelped, collapsing to the ground. For a moment, the gas station was chaos. The sound of fists meeting flesh, grunts of pain, and the screech of tires as a car pulled into the lot filled the air. The bikers weren't prepared for a fight. Certainly not with two women who clearly knew how to handle themselves. Within minutes, 3 of them were nursing bruises, and the rest were eyeing Sam and Emma warily. Iron, clutching his wrist, glared at the 2 women. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Sam didn't flinch. "Neither do you." Iron pointed a finger at them. "You'll regret this. Count on it." With that, he barked an order to his gang, and they retreated to their bikes. The roar of engines filled the air as they sped off into the night, leaving Sam and Emma standing in the glow of the gas station lights. Emma exhaled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Well, that was intense." Sam smirked, though her eyes flickered with concern. "Yeah, and something tells me this isn't the last we'll see of them." The pump clicked, signaling the gas tank was full. Sam replaced the nozzle and climbed into the driver's seat. Emma slid into the passenger side, glancing back toward the road. "Do you think they'll come after us?" Sam started the engine, her jaw set. "If they're smart, they won't. But we'd better be ready if they do." As they pulled out of the station, neither of them noticed the lone biker watching them from the shadows, his phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, boss," the man murmured. "We've got a situation. You're gonna want to hear this." The hum of the highway blended with the soft rhythm of the tires against the asphalt, but Sam's thoughts were elsewhere. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her eyes scanning the horizon as though expecting the bikers to appear in her rearview mirror at any moment. Beside her, Emma leaned against the window, her steady breathing giving the illusion of calm. For Sam, the night's events had stirred something deeper, a familiar unease rooted in her past. She couldn't help but think back to where it all began, her father's garage. Sam grew up in a small town where the roar of engines was as common as birdsong. Her father, Mike Carter, owned the town's only auto shop. From a young age, Sam was his shadow, fascinated by the way he could breathe life back into broken machines. "Here's the thing about engines, Sam," he would say, his voice a mix of patience and pride. "They're just like people. Sometimes, they need a little care and attention to get back on track." For years, Sam soaked up everything he taught her, from identifying a bad spark plug to rebuilding an engine block. By the time she was 15, she could outpace most of the mechanics at the shop. But her skills weren't always appreciated, especially in a field dominated by men who saw her as an outsider. She remembered her first job interview at a nearby repair shop. The manager, a burly man with a gruff demeanor, didn't even bother to look up from his clipboard as she spoke. "You're good with cars?" he had asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "Very," she replied, handing him her resume. He glanced at it, then smirked. "We're looking for someone who can handle heavy lifting, not just change windshield wipers." Sam had clenched her fists, but forced a polite smile. "I rebuilt a '69 Camaro engine from scratch last summer. Think that counts as heavy lifting?" The man's laughter echoed in her ears for days afterward. He didn't hire her, but she didn't let the rejection stop her. Back at her father's garage, she poured herself into her work, earning respect the hard way. Over time, her reputation spread. Customers started requesting her by name, and her confidence grew. But it wasn't all smooth roads. Sam's mother, Lisa, had passed away when she was 10, leaving a void that her father struggled to fill. He buried himself in his work, often leaving Sam to navigate her grief alone. While the garage became her sanctuary, the absence of her mother left a scar she carried quietly. Sam's thoughts drifted to one particular night years ago. She had been working late at the garage when a group of local boys came in, reeking of alcohol. "Hey, Carter," one of them slurred, leaning against the counter. "You're the grease monkey, right? Fix my ride." Sam had barely looked up from the carburetor she was cleaning. "Shop's closed. Come back tomorrow." The boy smirked, his friends laughing behind him. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. How about I pay you in favors?" The laughter stopped when Sam stood, a wrench in her hand. Her voice was calm but cold. "You've got 10 seconds to leave before I show you how this wrench works on more than just engines." The boys had left, muttering under their breath, but the encounter stayed with her. It wasn't the first time she had to defend herself, and it wouldn't be the last. "Hey!" Emma's voice broke through Sam's reverie, pulling her back to the present. "You okay?" Sam glanced at her, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, just thinking." Emma studied her for a moment. "About your dad?" Sam nodded. Her father had passed away 2 years earlier, a heart attack taking him too soon. The loss hit her harder than she let on. He had been her rock, her mentor, and her biggest supporter. "He'd have loved this," Sam said, gesturing to the open road ahead. "A road trip, just the two of us. He always said the best way to clear your head was to keep moving." Emma smiled softly. "Smart man." Sam's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I just wish he could have seen. I don't know. See me handle myself tonight. He used to worry about me, especially after everything." Emma didn't press, understanding the weight behind her friend's words. The faint glow of a gas station sign appeared in the distance, breaking the monotony of the dark highway. Sam slowed the car, pulling into the lot. As she stepped out to stretch, the memories continued to swirl in her mind. Her father had taught her more than just mechanics. He had taught her resilience. He always said, "You can't control the road ahead, but you can make sure your car is ready for it." And tonight, as the events at the gas station replayed in her head, Sam realized she'd spent her whole life preparing for moments like this. She glanced at Emma, who was leaning against the car, her eyes scanning the shadows. Despite her calm demeanor, Sam could see the tension in her posture. "You think they'll come after us?" Emma asked, echoing her earlier question. Sam exhaled, her voice steady. If they do, we'll be ready. She wasn't sure if she believed it, but one thing was certain. She wasn't the kind of person to back down. Not then, not now. As the two women got back into the car and drove off, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead was about to get a lot rougher. The rhythmic hum of the car engine filled the silence as Emma stared out the passenger side window. Her reflection in the glass caught her eye. There was a faint bruise forming on her knuckles from the scuffle earlier, a silent reminder of just how quickly life could spiral out of control. She turned to Sam, who seemed lost in thought, and sighed. "Do you ever feel like you can't escape your past?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam glanced over at her, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Sometimes." "Why?" Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let her mind wander back to the days that had shaped her, days that felt like a lifetime ago. Unlike Sam, who had grown up in the security of her father's garage, Emma's childhood had been far less predictable. Raised in a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of a busy city, Emma and her younger brother, Ethan, had learned early on that life wasn't always fair. Their mother, Karen Miller, worked double shifts as a waitress, often coming home exhausted and drained. Their father had walked out when Emma was 8, leaving Karen to raise 2 kids on her own. It wasn't an easy life, but they made do. Emma took on the role of protector, especially when it came to Ethan. He was smaller than most kids his age, quiet and bookish, which made him an easy target for bullies. Emma, on the other hand, was scrappy and fearless, never hesitating to stand up for her brother, even if it meant getting into trouble. One incident stood out more than the rest. Ethan had come home one day with a torn backpack and a bloody nose. When Emma pressed him for details, he reluctantly admitted that a group of older boys had cornered him after school. Emma didn't hesitate. She marched straight to the park where the boys usually hung out, her fists clenched and her heart pounding. "You think it's funny to pick on someone smaller than you?" she had yelled, her voice trembling with anger. The boys had laughed at first, but their amusement quickly faded when Emma stood her ground, refusing to back down. Though she walked away with a black eye and a split lip, the boys never bothered Ethan again. It was a defining moment for Emma, a realization that she couldn't rely on anyone else to protect the people she cared about. As she grew older, that protective instinct never waned. But it came at a cost. Emma's determination to shield those she loved often meant putting herself in harm's way, a habit that worried her mother. "Emma," Karen would say, her voice heavy with concern, "you can't fight every battle. Sometimes, you have to let people fend for themselves." But Emma couldn't, not when it came to her family. Her resolve was tested again a few years later when Ethan, now a teenager, started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Emma noticed the change almost immediately. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the nervous energy he carried like a second skin. One night, she confronted him. "What's going on with you, Ethan?" she demanded, cornering him in the kitchen. "Nothing," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I'm not stupid." Ethan finally looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and defiance. "You don't understand, Em. They're my friends." "Friends don't get you into trouble," she shot back. "What are you even doing with them?" He didn't answer, but Emma didn't need him to. She already knew. The final straw came when Ethan didn't come home one night. Emma spent hours driving around the city, her heart pounding as she searched for him. She finally found him in an abandoned parking lot, surrounded by a group of older boys. One of them was handing Ethan something, a small bag she didn't need to inspect to know what it was. Emma stormed out of the car, her voice cutting through the night. "Get away from him." The boys laughed, but Emma didn't care. She grabbed Ethan by the arm and dragged him back to the car, ignoring his protests. "You don't get it, Emma," he yelled as she drove home, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm tired of being the loser. I just wanted to fit in." Emma's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You don't need to fit in with people like that, Ethan. You're better than this." That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Emma sat with their mother at the kitchen table. Karen's hands trembled as she held her coffee mug, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Emma had only nodded, but in her heart, she made a silent promise. She would do whatever it took to keep her family safe. Back in the car, Emma blinked, her memories fading into the present. She glanced at Sam, who was still focused on the road. "I used to think I could fix everything," Emma said softly. "But some things are just out of our control." Sam glanced at her, her expression unreadable. "What happened?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "Another time." Sam didn't press, but Emma could tell she understood. They had both carried their share of burdens, and while neither of them said it aloud, there was an unspoken bond between them, a recognition of the strength it took to keep going, even when the odds were stacked against them. As the miles stretched on, Emma silently vowed to herself that no matter what lay ahead, she wouldn't let her past define her. And if the bikers thought they could intimidate her or Sam, they were in for a rude awakening. The gas station was just a memory in the rearview mirror, but the tension it had brought lingered like a dark cloud over Sam and Emma. The long, empty stretch of highway ahead seemed peaceful, but both women knew better than to trust appearances. Sam tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "We should have called the cops," she said, her tone betraying her frustration. Emma, seated with one leg tucked beneath her, shook her head. "And tell them what? That some bikers were jerks? They wouldn't have done anything until it was too late?" Sam sighed, knowing Emma was right. The law moved too slowly for situations like this. The headlights of their car pierced through the darkness, but Sam kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting the gleam of motorcycle headlights to appear. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Emma finally asked, breaking the uneasy silence. Sam hesitated. "They might. Guys like that, they don't like being embarrassed." Emma chuckled dryly. "Well, too bad for them." She flexed her sore hand. "I didn't hear them complaining when they got the upper hand earlier." Sam's lips curved into a small smile. Leave it to Emma to find humor in a situation like this. But the mood shifted when a faint rumble began to rise over the sound of the car's engine. Emma froze. "Do you hear that?" Sam nodded, her heart sinking. She rolled down the window slightly, letting the cool night air rush in. The sound was unmistakable now, the low, guttural growl of motorcycle engines. "They're coming," Sam muttered, her voice tight. Emma twisted in her seat, peering out the back window. Sure enough, 2 headlights emerged from the horizon, followed by 3 more. "There's 5 of them," Emma said, her voice steady but low. Sam's mind raced. "Hold on." She pressed her foot on the gas pedal, the car lurching forward as the speedometer climbed. The bikers closed the distance quickly. Their headlights weaved back and forth across the road like predators circling their prey. One of them, a hulking man with a shaved head, pulled alongside the car, revving his engine loudly. He leaned close to the window, grinning maliciously. "Pull over," he shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind. Sam ignored him, her jaw clenched. Another biker moved to the opposite side of the car, boxing them in. Emma's eyes darted between them, her mind racing for a solution. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. Sam glanced at her briefly. "We stay on the road. As long as we're moving, they can't do much." The biker on the left suddenly swerved toward the car, his handlebars scraping against the side mirror. Emma flinched, but recovered quickly. "They're testing us," she said, "trying to scare us into stopping." Sam's hands tightened on the wheel. "It's not going to work." The lead biker signaled to his crew, and 2 of them surged ahead, positioning themselves directly in front of the car. They slowed down, forcing Sam to hit the brakes. "This is bad," Emma muttered. Sam nodded, her eyes darting to the side of the road. An idea formed in her mind. "Hold on to something," she said. Emma's eyes widened. "Sam, what are you?" Before she could finish, Sam yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, veering off the highway and onto a narrow dirt road. Dust kicked up around them, obscuring their vision, but Sam didn't slow down. The bikers hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver. Then, like a pack of wolves, they gave chase. The dirt road twisted and turned, lined with thick trees and overgrown brush. The car bounced violently over the uneven terrain, and Emma gripped the door handle to steady herself. "Do you even know where this road goes?" she shouted over the noise. "No clue," Sam replied, her voice steady. but it's better than staying on the highway. The bikers were relentless, their headlights cutting through the swirling dust. One of them tried to pull alongside the car again, but the narrow road forced him to fall back. Emma's mind raced. They needed a plan, a way to turn the tables. "Sam, slow down a bit," she said suddenly. Sam shot her a questioning look. "What? Why?" "Just trust me," Emma said, unbuckling her seatbelt. Sam hesitated, then eased off the gas. The car slowed just enough for one of the bikers to catch up. Emma rolled down her window, clutching a heavy flashlight she had grabbed from the glove compartment. As the biker pulled alongside them, she leaned out, her eyes locked on his handlebars. With a swift, calculated swing, she smashed the flashlight against the biker's hand. He yelped in pain, losing control of his bike and skidding into the ditch. "Nice shot," Sam exclaimed, a flicker of admiration in her voice. Emma grinned. One down, 4 to go. The road began to widen, leading them to a clearing. Sam spotted an old, abandoned barn up ahead, and an idea sparked in her mind. "Hold on," she said, steering the car toward the barn. "What are you doing?" Emma asked, alarmed. "Evening the odds," Sam replied. The car screeched to a halt just outside the barn. Sam and Emma jumped out, the cool night air biting at their skin. The bikers weren't far behind. The remaining 4 roared into the clearing, their engines echoing in the stillness. Sam and Emma exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. "No more running," Sam said, her voice steady. Emma nodded, a small, defiant smile playing on her lips. "Let's show them who they're messing with." The barn loomed tall and ominous in the moonlight, its wooden frame weathered with age. The distant hum of the motorcycles grew louder as the 4 remaining bikers sped into the clearing. Sam and Emma exchanged a glance, their expressions a mix of determination and steely calm. "We're outnumbered," Sam muttered, her eyes scanning the barn for anything they could use to their advantage. "We've been outnumbered before," Emma replied, gripping the flashlight tightly. She was already bruised and battered from earlier, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. The bikers cut their engines, their headlights casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the barn. The leader of the group, the man with the shaved head and a snake tattoo winding up his neck, swung off his bike and strode forward. "Thought you could run, huh?" he sneered, his voice dripping with menace. "Big mistake." Behind him, the other 3 dismounted, cracking their knuckles and grinning like they'd already won. Sam stepped forward, putting herself between the bikers and Emma. "We didn't run," she said evenly. "We just didn't want to ruin the gas station parking lot with your egos." The leader's smirk faltered for a moment before he barked out a laugh. "You've got a mouth on you, sweetheart. Let's see how tough you are without your car." Emma's eyes flicked toward the barn doors, slightly ajar. She nudged Sam subtly with her elbow. "Inside," she murmured under her breath. Sam caught on immediately. The barn was their best chance. It was confined, dark, and unpredictable. "Come and get us then," Sam said, backing toward the barn. Her voice was steady, but her pulse raced. The leader's grin widened. "Oh, we will." Emma and Sam darted inside, their boots crunching against the dirt floor. The barn smelled of old hay and rust, its interior dimly lit by the moonlight streaming through cracks in the wooden walls. "Help me with this," Emma whispered, pointing to a stack of heavy crates near the door. Together, they shoved the crates into place, barricading the entrance just as the bikers reached the barn. The leader pounded on the doors, his voice a growl of frustration. "You think you can hide? We'll tear this place apart." "Let them try," Emma said, her voice low. She scanned the barn, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Rusted tools hanging on the walls, splintered wooden beams, and a rickety ladder leading to the hayloft. Sam followed her gaze. "Up there," she said, nodding toward the hayloft. "It'll give us the high ground." The 2 women climbed quickly, the ladder creaking under their weight. Once they reached the top, Emma spotted an old pitchfork and handed it to Sam. "Here. Not exactly a sword, but it'll do." Sam took it, testing its weight. "And what are you using?" Emma held up the flashlight and gave it a quick swing. "Improvise and adapt." The bikers finally broke through the barricade with a deafening crash, spilling into the barn like a flood. Their leader barked orders, his voice echoing off the wooden walls. "Spread out. Find them." The hayloft provided good cover, and for a moment, Sam and Emma remained hidden, watching as the bikers moved below. Emma nudged Sam. "We need to take them out one at a time. Quietly, if we can." Sam nodded, her grip tightening on the pitchfork. "I'll distract them. You strike." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Are we really going with the old bait and switch? Got a better idea?" Emma smirked. "Nope. Let's do it." Sam tossed a small stone she'd found, and it clattered against the far wall. The sound drew one of the bikers away from the group, his footsteps crunching as he approached the noise. Emma moved like a shadow, descending the ladder silently. As the biker rounded the corner, she sprang forward, swinging the flashlight with all her strength. It connected with a dull thud, and the man crumpled to the ground. "One down," Emma muttered, dragging his unconscious body out of sight. The leader, still near the entrance, growled in frustration. "What's taking so long? Find them." Another biker ventured closer to the ladder. This time, Sam acted. She jabbed the pitchfork downward, the blunt end catching him in the shoulder and sending him sprawling backward. "Two down," Sam called softly, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. The remaining two bikers were smarter. They stuck together, their backs to each other as they scanned the barn. "We know you're in here," the leader shouted. "Come out, and maybe we'll go easy on you." Emma snorted softly. "Not likely." She grabbed a rusted chain hanging from a nearby beam and tested its weight. It creaked ominously, but it held. "Cover me," she whispered to Sam. Before Sam could respond, Emma swung down from the hayloft like a modern-day swashbuckler, the chain wrapped around her hands. She kicked one of the bikers square in the chest, sending him sprawling. The leader turned, his face twisting in rage. He lunged at Emma, but she dodged, rolling to her feet and raising the flashlight like a club. Sam climbed down quickly, joining the fray. She and Emma stood back to back as the leader and the remaining biker circled them. "End of the line, ladies," the leader snarled. Emma smirked. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." The fight was brutal and chaotic. The confined space worked to Emma and Sam's advantage, forcing the bikers to rely on brute strength rather than speed. Sam used the pitchfork to keep the leader at bay, while Emma wielded her flashlight with precision, targeting knees and ribs. Finally, with a well-timed swing, Sam knocked the leader off balance. He stumbled backward into a stack of crates, which collapsed under his weight. The last biker, seeing his comrades defeated, raised his hands in surrender. All right, I'm done." Emma stepped forward, her chest heaving as she glared at him. "Get your friends and get out of here. If I ever see you again." She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. The biker nodded frantically, dragging his unconscious comrades out of the barn. As the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance, Sam and Emma slumped against the barn wall, their adrenaline finally ebbing. Sam let out a shaky laugh. "Remind me to never stop at that gas station again." Emma chuckled, wincing as she touched her bruised shoulder. "Deal." But deep down, both women knew this wasn't the end. The bikers wouldn't forget what had happened tonight, and neither would they. The barn fell silent as the last faint echoes of the motorcycles faded into the night. The moonlight filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, casting a soft glow over Sam and Emma as they sat on the ground, catching their breath. Sam leaned her head back against the barn wall, her chest rising and falling with each deep breath. "Well," she muttered, "that wasn't how I thought today was going to go." Emma, cradling her bruised arm, let out a dry laugh. "What? You don't schedule ambushes by biker gangs into your day?" Sam shot her a tired grin. "Not usually." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a heavy blanket. "Do you think they'll come back?" Emma asked, breaking the silence. Sam tilted her head, considering the question. "Maybe. Guys like that don't take humiliation lightly." Emma sighed, pushing herself to her feet. "Then we'd better be ready for them." She wandered around the barn, her sharp eyes scanning the walls and corners for anything useful. The The barn was old, abandoned, and mostly empty, but there were a few forgotten tools and supplies that could come in handy. "Look at this," she called, holding up a rusted crowbar. Sam got to her feet, brushing dirt off her jeans. "Not exactly top of the line, but it's better than nothing." Emma shrugged, testing the weight of the crowbar. "We'll make it work. We always do." As they gathered what few supplies they could find, the reality of their situation began to sink in. "We can't stay here," Sam said, glancing toward the barn doors. "If they come back with more guys, we'll be sitting ducks." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Agreed. But we also can't just drive blindly into the night. We need a plan." Sam rubbed her temples, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. "First, we need rest. Then, we figure out our next move." Emma looked at her friend, noting the exhaustion etched into her features. "All right, but let's at least keep watching shifts. I don't trust that they're gone for good." Sam nodded, appreciating Emma's practicality. "Deal. You take the first shift. Wake me in a couple of hours." Emma smiled faintly. "You've got it." The night stretched on, quiet and still. Sam dozed fitfully on a makeshift bed of old hay while Emma kept watch, her crowbar resting across her lap. Her mind raced as she stared out into the darkness, the events of the night replaying over and over. She thought about the bikers, their leering faces and cruel laughter. She thought about the way her heart had pounded when she and Sam had stood back to back, fighting for their lives. And she thought about what came next. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight seeped through the barn's wooden slats, casting long shadows across the dirt floor. Sam stirred, stretching stiffly as she sat up. "Anything?" she asked, her voice hoarse from sleep. Emma shook her head. "Nothing. Either they're smarter than we gave them credit for, or they're regrouping." Sam sighed, running a hand through her messy hair. "I'm betting on the second one." Emma stood, stretching her sore muscles. "Then we'd better stay one step ahead of them." The two women stepped outside, the crisp morning air refreshing against their tired faces. The barn sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields and a distant tree line. Sam leaned against the car, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to get to a town. Somewhere with people. Witnesses." Emma nodded. "And supplies. We can't keep running on empty." Sam opened the car door, checking the gas gauge. "We've got enough to make it to the next town, but not much farther." "Then that's our first stop," Emma said, her tone decisive. "We get fuel, food, and figure out what to do from there." As they climbed into the car, Sam hesitated, her hands resting on the steering wheel. "You think we're safe?" Emma looked out the window, her expression unreadable. "Safe? No, but I think we're ready." Sam nodded, starting the engine. The car rumbled to life, and they pulled out of the clearing, leaving the barn behind. But as they drove down the empty dirt road, a shadow of doubt lingered in the back of their minds. The bikers weren't the kind to give up easily, and neither were they. The small town of Pine Ridge appeared on the horizon like an oasis after the harrowing night. The town consisted of a few streets lined with old brick buildings, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a lone gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Sam pulled the car into the gas station, parking by the pump. She glanced at Emma, whose eyes scanned the area with suspicion. "Do you think it's safe?" Sam asked quietly. Emma shrugged, gripping the crowbar she'd kept by her feet. "We don't have much of a choice. Let's be quick." The two women stepped out of the car, the morning sun casting long shadows across the asphalt. The gas station was eerily quiet, with no other cars in sight. A bell jingled as Emma pushed open the door to the convenience store. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee and cleaning supplies. A bored-looking cashier sat behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up as Emma entered, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Sam stayed outside, pumping gas while keeping an eye on the road. The events of the previous night had left her on edge, and every distant sound made her tense. Emma moved quickly through the aisles, grabbing bottles of water, protein bars, and a small first aid kit. As she reached for a bag of trail mix, a voice behind her made her freeze. "Rough night?" She turned to see a tall man in a leather jacket leaning against the end of the aisle. His arms were crossed, and a knowing smirk played on his lips. Emma's grip tightened on the trail mix. Something like that. The man tilted his head, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. You don't look like you're from around here. And you don't look like a cashier, Emma shot back, her voice sharp. The man chuckled, straightening up. Fair enough. Name's Cole. I'm just a concerned citizen. Concerned about what? Strangers rolling into town after a fight with a local biker gang. Emma's stomach sank. She glanced toward the front of the store, where Sam was still outside, oblivious. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma said, keeping her tone neutral. Cole smirked again. Sure you don't. But word travels fast in small towns, and those bikers? They've got friends everywhere. Emma clenched her jaw. Is that a threat? Not from me, Cole said, raising his hands in mock surrender. But you should know. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. And this town? He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. It's not as friendly as it looks. Emma didn't reply. She turned on her heel and headed for the counter, dumping her items onto the conveyor belt. The cashier finally looked up, his eyes darting nervously to Cole before scanning Emma's purchases. That'll be $23.50, he muttered. Emma handed over the cash, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she walked back to the car, she spotted Cole standing by a black motorcycle parked at the side of the building. He gave her a small, mocking salute as she passed. Sam looked up as Emma climbed into the passenger seat, tossing the bag of supplies onto the back seat. You okay? Sam asked, frowning. We need to get out of here, Emma said curtly, buckling her seatbelt. Sam didn't ask questions. She finished pumping the gas, hopped into the driver's seat, and started the engine. As they pulled out of the station, Emma glanced in the side mirror. Cole was still standing by his motorcycle, watching them with a predatory grin. The road out of Pine Ridge was lined with dense trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Sam drove in tense silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. What happened in there? She finally asked. Emma hesitated, her eyes scanning the road behind them. Let's just say we're not as anonymous as we'd like to be. The bikers have connections here. Sam cursed under her breath. Great. So now what? We keep moving, Emma said firmly. We can't stop until we find somewhere safe. But safety was a relative term. As the car rounded a bend, Emma spotted something in the distance. A row of motorcycles parked haphazardly across the road, blocking their path. Sam, Emma said sharply. I see it, Sam replied, her jaw tightening. The bikers were waiting for them. The women had no choice but to stop. As Sam killed the engine, the bikers stepped out from the trees, their faces twisted into cruel smiles. Well, look who it is, one of them sneered. Emma and Sam exchanged a glance, their minds racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But they weren't going down without a fight. The bikers closed in, their boots crunching on the gravel as they surrounded the car. Sam and Emma sat frozen for a moment, their instincts screaming at them to act, but the sheer number of opponents made their options slim. Out of the car, ladies, one of the bikers barked. His grizzled face bore a smug grin as he twirled a tire iron in his hand. Sam's hand hovered over the ignition. We could ram through them, she whispered to Emma. Emma shook her head. They'd catch us before we made it a mile. Let's play along for now. Sam clenched her teeth but nodded, slowly opening the driver's door. Emma followed suit, stepping out with her crowbar hidden behind her back. The leader of the group, a towering man with a jagged scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. His leather vest bore a patch that read, Serpents, the same emblem they had seen the night before. You've got some nerve, running from us, he said, his voice low and menacing. Wasn't running, Emma shot back, her voice steady. Just didn't feel like sticking around for your little party. Scarface chuckled, a deep, guttural sound that sent chills down Sam's spine. Feisty. I like that. But see, you've made this personal now. And nobody disrespects the Serpents. Sam stepped forward, her fists clenched. You attacked us. What did you expect? Scarface's grin widened. Doesn't matter what I expected. What matters is what happens next. The bikers began to close the circle, their weapons glinting in the sunlight. Sam and Emma exchanged a glance, silently agreeing on one thing. They weren't going down without a fight. Got a plan? Sam murmured under her breath. Emma's eyes darted to the tree line beyond the bikers. We need a distraction. Sam nodded subtly, then turned her attention back to the leader. You know, she said loudly, I'm starting to think you serpents aren't as tough as you think. The group erupted in laughter, but the leader's expression darkened. Careful, girl. You're already in deep enough. Sam smirked, her confidence more bravado than anything. If you were as tough as you say, you wouldn't need to gang up on two women. Seems kind of cowardly. The taunt worked. Several of the bikers bristled, their egos bruised, and began arguing amongst themselves. Emma took the opportunity to inch closer to the car, her crowbar still hidden. Scarface noticed the movement and pointed at her. You're not going anywhere. Emma froze, her mind racing. Then, without warning, she hurled the crowbar at one of the bikers, hitting him square in the chest. The man stumbled back with a grunt, and chaos erupted. Sam dove for the driver's side door as the bikers surged forward. She yanked the crowbar from the ground, swinging wildly to keep them at bay. Emma, meanwhile, sprinted for the tree line. Sam, move, she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. Sam didn't hesitate. She jumped into the car, slamming the door shut and starting the engine. The tires screeched as she threw it into reverse, sending gravel flying at the bikers closest to the vehicle. Emma weaved through the trees, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She could hear the bikers shouting behind her, but the dense forest slowed them down. Come on, she muttered, glancing over her shoulder. Suddenly, Sam's car burst through the underbrush, the front bumper smashing through branches. The passenger door swung open, and Emma didn't think twice. She leapt inside, barely managing to shut the door before Sam floored the gas pedal. The car careened down a dirt path, bouncing wildly over roots and rocks. Behind them, the bikers gave chase, their motorcycles roaring like angry beasts. Emma grabbed the handle above the window to steady herself. You're insane. Yeah, well, it's working, isn't it? Sam shot back, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. The chase was relentless. The motorcycles were faster and more maneuverable, gaining ground with every second. Sam's eyes darted between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, her mind racing for a solution. There, Emma shouted, pointing to a narrow bridge up ahead. It was old and rickety, barely wide enough for the car. You're kidding me, Sam said, her voice tight. Emma shook her head. Do it. They won't follow us. Sam gritted her teeth and aimed the car for the bridge. The tires hit the wooden planks with a jolt, the entire structure groaning under the weight of the car. Behind them, the bikers skidded to a halt, unwilling to risk their heavier motorcycles on the unstable bridge. Sam and Emma didn't stop to celebrate. The bridge creaked ominously, but they made it across just as the first plank gave way, crashing into the river below. As they reached the other side, Sam finally let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That was too close, she muttered, pulling the car to a stop. Emma leaned back in her seat, her chest heaving. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've got some breathing room. The two women sat in silence for a moment, the adrenaline slowly fading. Then Emma turned to Sam, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Nice driving. Sam chuckled weakly. Nice crowbar throw. They both laughed, the tension breaking for just a moment. But they knew it wasn't over. The serpents weren't the type to give up, and the women were still on their radar. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sam started the car again, determination hardening her features. Let's keep moving. The road stretched ahead, winding through thick forests and over rolling hills. The adrenaline from their escape was beginning to wear off, leaving both Sam and Emma in a heavy silence. How long do you think we can keep this up? Sam finally asked, her voice strained. As long as we have to, Emma replied, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. She was determined, but exhaustion was creeping into her voice. Sam glanced at the gas gauge. We'll need to refuel soon. Again. Emma sighed, leaning her head against the window. Let's find somewhere less obvious this time. They eventually came upon a small, rundown service station tucked into a clearing off the main road. The place looked abandoned, its faded signs swinging in the breeze. "Perfect," Sam muttered, pulling the car up to the lone pump. As Emma stepped out to stretch, she noticed a figure emerging from the shadows of the station. An older man, thin and wiry, with a face weathered by years of hard living, approached them. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and carried a toolbox in one hand. "Need some help?" the man asked, his voice gravelly but not unfriendly. Sam and Emma exchanged a wary glance. "We're fine," Emma said cautiously. The man raised an eyebrow, his eyes flicking to the scratches and dents on their car. "Looks like you've been through hell." "Something like that," Sam said, keeping her tone neutral. The man nodded slowly, as if piecing things together. "Name's Hank," he said, setting down the toolbox. "This station's mine. Don't get many visitors out here." Hank's demeanor was calm, almost too calm, but something about him put Emma slightly at ease. "We just need gas," she said, watching him closely. "Sure thing," Hank replied, gesturing to the pump. "Old thing still works, but you gotta be patient with it. I'll get it started for you." As Hank fiddled with the pump, Emma pulled Sam aside. "What do you think? Is he legit?" Sam shrugged. "I don't know, but we don't have a lot of options." As they waited, Hank struck up a conversation. "You're not from around here," he said, his tone casual. "No," Emma replied, keeping her answers short. Hank chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm not prying. Just curious. It's not every day I see two women rolling through here looking like they've been in a war zone." Sam folded her arms. "We've had some trouble, if that's what you're asking." Hank nodded knowingly. "Trouble with the serpents?" The air seemed to freeze. Emma's hand instinctively moved toward the crowbar she had stashed in the car. "What do you know about them?" she asked, her voice low. Hank's eyes hardened. "Enough to know they don't like losing. And from the looks of it, you two have managed to piss them off pretty good." The tension was palpable, but Hank raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Relax," he said. "I'm not one of them, but I've had my share of run-ins. Let's just say they've made my life harder than it needs to be." Emma studied him carefully. "Why should we trust you?" Hank shrugged. "You don't have to, but if you want to stay one step ahead of those bastards, I might be able to help." Sam and Emma exchanged a glance. "What kind of help?" Sam asked cautiously. Hank gestured toward the station. "Come inside. I've got something you'll want to see." Emma hesitated, but Sam gave her a nod. They followed Hank into the building, their guard still up. Inside, the station was cluttered with tools, maps, and old equipment. Hank led them to a back room, where a large, hand-drawn map covered the wall. "This," he said, pointing to the map, "is every hideout, safe house, and backroad the serpents use in this area." Sam's eyes widened. "How do you know all this?" "Used to be one of them," Hank admitted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "A long time ago. Got out before things got too bad. But I kept my ears open." Emma frowned. "If you left, why haven't they come after you?" "They tried," Hank said with a grim smile. "Didn't work out too well for them." Sam crossed her arms. "So why are you helping us?" Hank's expression softened. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted by them. And because someone needs to stand up to those bastards." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, what do you suggest?" Hank traced a finger along the map. "You need to stay off the main roads. They've got scouts everywhere. There's a back road here," he said, pointing to a winding path through the mountains. "That'll take you far enough out of their territory to buy you some time." "And if they follow us?" Sam asked. Hank gave her a hard look. "Then you make them regret it." Before they left, Hank handed them a small radio. "If you get into trouble, use this. I'll be listening." Emma took the radio, nodding her thanks. "We owe you." Hank waved her off. "Just stay alive. That'll be thanks enough." As they pulled away from the station, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they had finally caught a break. But Sam's grip on the wheel remained tense. "Do you think we can trust him?" she asked. Emma glanced at the radio in her lap. "I don't know, but right now, he's all we've got." The sun dipped lower in the sky as they followed Hank's directions, the road ahead growing narrower and more isolated. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope. But the serpents weren't the type to let their prey slip away so easily. The winding backroads Hank had pointed out were far less traveled than the highways, the landscape growing more rugged as they pressed on. The thick trees seemed to close in around them, the only sounds being the hum of the car and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. Sam kept her eyes on the road, her grip tight on the steering wheel. Every creak and groan of the old vehicle had her on edge, but she didn't dare slow down. "We're making good time," Emma remarked, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror. Sam nodded but didn't speak. There was something unsettling about the quiet, the calm before the storm. Hours passed, and the road seemed to stretch on forever. The further they drove, the more isolated it became. Soon, even the occasional car was a rare sight. It was just them, the endless trees, and the looming mountains ahead. Sam glanced at the gas gauge. It was reading near empty. "We should stop soon," she said. "Find a place to refuel or at least rest." Emma nodded, her brow furrowed as she studied the horizon. "There's nothing around for miles, though." Sam sighed. "We'll make it work." As they crested a hill, a small clearing appeared in the distance. At first glance, it seemed to be a forgotten rest stop, an abandoned building that had once served travelers long ago. The roof was sagging, and the paint on the sign was so faded that the letters were barely legible. Sam slowed the car, approaching cautiously. "It's something, at least." The closer they got, the more the place seemed to resemble a ghost town. The building looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but the worn-out gas pump stood silently by the side, as if waiting for someone to pull up. "Maybe it's still functional," Emma suggested, looking hopeful. Sam didn't reply. She parked the car and got out, immediately feeling the stillness in the air. It was too quiet. Emma followed her, her hand still near the crowbar in case they weren't alone. The two women made their way toward the pump, and Sam tugged at the rusted handle. It didn't budge. "Great," she muttered, wiping her hands on her jeans. Just then, a voice called out from behind them. "You shouldn't be here." Both women spun around to see a man standing in the doorway of the dilapidated building. His clothes were dark and worn, his face obscured by the shadows of his hood. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively reached for the crowbar, but Sam stepped in front of her. "We don't mean any harm," Sam said, her voice steady but guarded. "We're just looking for gas and a place to rest." The man took a step forward, his eyes sharp beneath the hood. "This place isn't a safe haven for people like you." Emma frowned. "What do you mean, people like us?" The man didn't answer immediately. He glanced around, making sure they weren't being watched, before he spoke again. "You're not the first ones to pass through here. The serpents, they know this place. You'll lead them right to it." Sam's breath caught in her throat. "You know about the serpents?" The man nodded grimly. "I used to work for them. Not by choice." Emma exchanged a look with Sam. "Then why are you helping us?" The man's face darkened. "I'm not helping you. I'm warning you." "Why?" Sam pressed. "What's your name?" The man hesitated before answering. "Jack. And I've seen enough to know the serpents don't let anyone go. They'll come for you, and they'll burn everything in their path to get what they want." Emma took a step forward. "We can't keep running. If we don't stop them now, they'll keep coming for you." Jack finished her sentence. "I know." There was a long pause, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had frozen. The realization that the serpents were always just one step behind them pressed down on Sam and Emma. They were running out of time. "We need to find a way to hit them first," Sam said, her voice low but determined. Jack studied her, then glanced back at the car. "I have a few ideas, but you'll need help, and the odds are slim." Emma looked around, taking in the rundown station. "What help? What do you have here?" Jack nodded toward the building. "I've been gathering intel on them. I know where they've been hiding out, where they stash their weapons and cash. It's not much, but it's a start." Sam exchanged a glance with Emma. "We need more than a start. We need leverage, a way to hit them where it hurts." Jack's eyes glinted with a quiet intensity. "Then you'll need to be willing to do whatever it takes. This won't be clean." "We don't care about clean," Emma said firmly. "We need to end this." Jack paused, then finally gave a slow nod. "All right, I'll help, but we'll need to move fast." They'll be looking for you soon. And if they catch wind of what we're planning, Sam didn't wait for him to finish. Then we'll make sure they don't catch us. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, the three of them made their plans in the shadow of the old building. The weight of what they were about to do settled on Sam and Emma's shoulders like a heavy cloak. But there was no turning back now. The serpents had underestimated them once, and that was a mistake they wouldn't make again. The air was thick with tension as Sam, Emma, and Jack huddled around a rusted table in the back of the crumbling building. The map Jack had spread out in front of them was old, with marks and scribbles that spoke of years of observations, but it was the best they had. "We'll need a plan," Jack said, tapping his finger on the map. "If we're going to take them down, we can't go in blind." Sam and Emma both nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. They were no longer running. They were ready to fight. "Okay," Sam said, her voice steady. "What's the first step?" Jack leaned in, his eyes scanning the map. "There's a small arms stash just a few miles from here. It's a place the serpents use to store their guns and ammo. If we hit it, we'll at least be armed." Emma crossed her arms, eyeing the map. "You're sure it's unguarded?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "It should be. It's a backdoor location, and they don't expect anyone to come poking around. But we have to move fast. We can't afford to linger." Sam clenched her jaw. "We get the weapons, then what?" Jack's fingers traced another location. "There's a warehouse where they store cash and other valuables. It's heavily guarded, but we hit it next. Disrupt their flow of money, and they'll be forced to react. We'll have them on the defensive." Emma let out a breath, her mind racing as she processed the information. "This is a lot to do in one night." "We don't have a choice," Jack replied. "If we wait too long, they'll regroup and make their move. You'll be stuck on the run again, and it'll be a whole lot harder to get them to make mistakes." Sam stood up, pacing the room. "All right, let's say we're in. How do we get in and out without them noticing?" Jack smiled grimly. "That's where you two come in. You've got the speed and the stealth. You'll hit the stash, grab what you need, then I'll pick you up when it's time to move to the warehouse. I've got a safe route planned." Emma's brows furrowed. "And if something goes wrong?" Jack met her eyes. "Then we adapt, but we stick together. If one of us falls, we don't leave anyone behind." Sam nodded, her thoughts turning to the faces of the men who had hurt them. "We can do this. We're not afraid of them anymore." The plan was set. The next few hours would determine their future. Sam, Emma, and Jack would move quickly, no room for error. They had trained for moments like this, but it was different now. They were fighting for their lives, for their freedom. As they geared up, Jack passed them both a set of black tactical vests. They were heavy, but necessary. The vests would offer some protection against bullets, even if it wasn't guaranteed to stop one. "We'll need to stay low," Jack reminded them. "The serpents are ruthless, but they're also smart. They won't hesitate to kill." Emma tightened the straps of her vest. "We won't give them the chance." Jack looked at both of them, his expression hardening. It's now or never. The first stop was the arms stash. The woods around it were dense, the trees casting long shadows in the moonlight. Jack led the way, guiding them through the underbrush with the quiet expertise of someone who had spent years avoiding detection. Sam and Emma followed closely, their movements swift and silent. The adrenaline was already beginning to surge through them as they neared their target. The stash was in an old, decaying barn on the edge of a clearing. Jack motioned for them to stop. He peered around a corner, checking the surroundings. "All clear," he whispered, then motioned for them to move. They crept forward, their footsteps muffled by the grass. Sam reached for the door handle, and with a soft click, the barn door opened. Inside, the dim light revealed crates and boxes piled high with weapons. Emma's eyes lit up as she took in the sight of the rifles, handguns, and boxes of ammunition. "This is it," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Load up," Jack said. "We don't have much time." They quickly gathered as many weapons as they could carry, handguns, knives, and 2 automatic rifles. It wasn't ideal, but it would be enough to give them a fighting chance. As they were about to leave, Emma paused. She felt a cold sensation crawl up her spine. Something wasn't right. "Sam," she whispered urgently, her eyes scanning the trees. Sam tensed, sensing it too. Get ready, she said quietly. We might have company. They moved to the side of the barn, crouching low, listening. A sound in the distance, a motorcycle engine. The unmistakable hum of a serpent's bike. Shit, Jack muttered. They found us. Emma looked at Sam, her voice steady but full of urgency. We need to move. Now. They didn't hesitate. Sam and Emma darted through the trees, keeping low as they made their way back to the clearing. Jack was right behind them, guiding them toward the escape route. The sound of the motorcycle grew louder, and Emma's heart raced. Just as they were about to break through the tree line, a shout echoed through the night. Stop right there. They turned. A group of men, including the one on the motorcycle, emerged from the shadows. The serpents. Emma's grip tightened around the rifle she was carrying. Not today, she whispered. The serpents were closing in, but Sam and Emma weren't about to let them take control. With a deep breath, Emma raised the rifle and fired a warning shot. The men hesitated for a split second. It was all the time they needed. They ran, weaving through the trees, the sound of pursuit growing closer. They didn't know how much time they had, but they had to get to safety. The first part of the plan had worked. Now it was time to move on to the next phase. The chase had begun. Sam, Emma, and Jack were sprinting through the forest, heartbeats racing, adrenaline flooding their veins. The serpents were on their tail, and every sound seemed to echo louder in the night. Branches snapping underfoot, the thrum of motorcycles in the distance. Emma's breath came in ragged bursts as she pushed forward, her rifle swinging in her grip. We need to lose them, she said, her voice tight with panic but resolute. Sam glanced back for a split second. Keep moving. They're not far behind. Jack, despite the urgency of the situation, stayed calm. He had been in tight spots before, and this wasn't his first time being hunted. There's a creek ahead. We can use it to throw them off our scent. Emma nodded. I know it. There's an old footbridge about a mile up. We can cross, and they'll have a hell of a time tracking us through the water. But the serpents were relentless. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder as they approached. Sam's eyes darted from side to side, looking for an escape, something that could give them a moment to catch their breath. But the forest seemed to close in, the trees growing thicker, the underbrush more tangled. They were slowing down. We can't outrun them in the woods, Sam said, her voice low but urgent. We need to make a stand, just for a minute. Jack shook his head. No time for that. We need to get to the creek. It's our only shot. But Sam was already scanning the area. The creek wasn't far now, but the serpents were closing in faster than she'd hoped. They would be upon them within minutes. Emma's eyes narrowed as she heard the distinctive roar of the motorcycles approaching from behind. We need to split up, she said suddenly, her tone decisive. We can't outrun them as a group. They'll catch us all if we stay together. Sam opened her mouth to protest, but Emma was already moving, her form disappearing into the trees. Jack hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement. All right, he said, pulling Sam back toward the path. We'll take the right. You take the left. Head for the creek. I'll signal you when we're clear. Sam's heart raced, but there was no time to argue. She looked at Emma one last time before both women disappeared into the shadows of the woods. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. Sam and Jack ran in silence, their feet pounding the ground, weaving through the trees. The sound of the motorcycles was deafening now. They were close. Too close. Just as Sam spotted the glint of water through the trees, a loud crash echoed from behind them, a tree branch snapping under the weight of something heavy. She turned just in time to see one of the serpents on a bike coming through the underbrush, barreling straight toward her. Without thinking, she raised her rifle and fired a shot into the air. The motorcycle skidded, the rider jerking the handlebars to the side, narrowly avoiding a collision with a nearby tree. But it was enough to slow him down, and Sam seized the opportunity to veer off the path toward the creek. She sprinted harder, hearing the roar of the other bikes getting louder, but the creek was so close now. Her feet splashed into the shallow water as she crossed the first part of the creek. But there was no time to rest. Jack wasn't far behind, but he had to be careful. The serpents knew the woods better than anyone. They would have no trouble picking up the trail again. He reached the creek just as Sam was pulling herself out on the other side. His breath was coming fast, but he forced himself to stay composed. "We need to keep moving. Now." Sam nodded, already scanning the area for Emma. They couldn't afford to waste any time. They crossed the creek, making their way toward the old footbridge. But just as they reached it, a shout rang out from behind them. "There they are." The serpents were close, far too close for comfort. Jack grabbed Sam by the arm and yanked her toward the bridge. "Keep running," he shouted. "We're almost there." The footbridge creaked underfoot as they crossed. Sam dared a glance back, but saw only the dark shapes of the serpents emerging from the trees. The gap between them was closing, but the bridge was their last hope of losing them in the night. They reached the other side, but just as they were about to dart into the cover of the trees, the sound of a gunshot rang out. "Damn it," Jack swore, pulling Sam down as the bullet whizzed overhead. The serpents weren't just chasing them. They were trying to take them out. "Stay down," Jack hissed. "They're not going to stop. We have to fight back." Sam glanced at him, her hand instinctively going to her sidearm. "Where's Emma?" They could hear the motorcycles on the other side of the creek now, their engines growling like beasts in pursuit. Sam's heart thudded in her chest. They had to find Emma. If she was caught alone, it would be over. Jack stood, motioning for Sam to follow him. "Stay low," he whispered, "and keep your eyes open. We'll find her." They moved cautiously through the trees, the sound of the serpents' bikes growing fainter as they made their way further into the woods. The last thing Sam wanted was to be caught in the open, but she knew they couldn't leave Emma behind. A sudden rustling caught her attention. Sam froze, and Jack did the same. She lifted her rifle, scanning the area. From the darkness emerged Emma, her face smeared with dirt, but her expression as determined as ever. "I got them distracted," she said, breathing heavily. "They think we doubled back, but we don't have much time before they realize what's happened." Sam's heart lifted in relief. "We need to go. Now." The three of them turned and ran, making their way deeper into the forest. They were no longer just fleeing. They were fighting back. The serpents might have thought they were the hunters, but tonight, Sam, Emma, and Jack were taking control. They were getting closer to their goal, and the serpents wouldn't know what hit them. As the trees opened up into a clearing, the three of them paused, catching their breath. They had survived the first part of the chase, but the war was just beginning. The brief pause in the clearing was enough for Sam, Emma, and Jack to catch their breath, but they all knew it wasn't over. The serpents weren't the type to back off easily, and the moment they realized the women had escaped, they'd come at them with everything they had. "We can't afford to relax," Jack muttered, his eyes scanning the edge of the clearing. "They'll be regrouping, and they'll come at us with more force next time." Sam nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead, her mind still racing from the close call. "What's the next step? We can't keep running forever." Jack shifted his weight, pulling out a map he had kept hidden in his jacket. The faint glow from a flashlight illuminated the paper. "We head to an old safe house. It's in the city, off the grid. We can lay low there for a bit and figure out our next move. The serpents won't find us there." Emma looked up from her rifle, which she had just reloaded. "How far is it?" "About an hour," Jack replied, folding the map. "We need to move fast before they regroup." Sam and Emma exchanged a brief glance. The idea of running again didn't sit well with either of them, but Jack was right. They had no choice. "All right," Sam said, her voice firm. "Let's get moving." The night seemed to stretch on forever as they moved through the dense forest and into the city outskirts. The quiet was almost eerie, with only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustling of leaves keeping them company. They kept to the shadows, avoiding the roads, sticking to alleyways and hidden paths. Despite the exhaustion, they pushed on. The serpents were after them, and they couldn't afford to let up. As they neared the edge of the city, Jack led them down an old service road that was barely visible in the dark. The safe house wasn't much, just a small, dilapidated house tucked between two larger buildings. But it was secure. No one ever looked twice at this part of town, and it had a history of being a place for people who wanted to disappear. Jack opened the rusted door with a soft creak, motioning for the others to follow him inside. The interior was dim and cold. Dusty furniture sat in the corners, untouched for years. The air smelled of old wood and mildew, but it was safe. Sam could feel her tension ease slightly as they stepped inside, knowing they had a moment of respite. She shut the door behind them with a soft click. All right, what now? Jack took a seat at the small table in the center of the room, looking around. We need to lay low for a few hours, get some rest. The serpents won't be able to track us here. I'll take first watch. You two get some sleep. Emma didn't argue. She was exhausted, physically and mentally, but she knew Jack was right. They needed a break, even if it was just for a few hours. Sam glanced around the room. What's the plan for tomorrow? We regroup, Jack said, his eyes narrowing as he thought. We'll hit them hard this time. We'll attack their main base, throw them off guard, make them scramble. We take the fight to them before they have a chance to recover. Emma stretched, wincing slightly from the tension in her muscles. I'm in. Let's make them regret messing with us. Sam crossed her arms, her mind already turning over the possibilities. They had the element of surprise now, but for how long? The serpents were dangerous, and they'd be looking for payback, but they were prepared. Sam had no intention of letting them get away with what they had done. Hours passed in the dim light of the safe house. Jack stayed on watch, his eyes flicking toward the window every few seconds, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Emma was asleep on the old couch, her breathing steady and deep. Sam sat by the window, her mind unable to settle. She couldn't rest. Not yet. Not until they had dealt with the serpents once and for all. Suddenly, the sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. Sam's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes locked with Jack's across the room. They're here, Jack muttered, grabbing his rifle from where it had been propped against the wall. Sam moved toward Emma, shaking her awake. Emma, wake up. They're coming. Emma sat up quickly, her eyes wide. How many? Jack peered through the cracked window, his face grim. I don't know, but they've got motorcycles. We don't have much time. The three of them moved quickly, preparing for what was coming. They grabbed their weapons, checking ammo and making sure everything was ready. The serpents wouldn't hesitate to attack, and they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Sam turned to Jack. We fight. We take them out before they get inside. Jack nodded. We're not letting them take control again. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder, and soon, the unmistakable roar of the engines filled the air. Sam's pulse quickened, the weight of the moment settling over her. This was it. The fight they had been running from for so long was finally here. She took a deep breath. Get ready, she said to Emma. We're not running anymore. They moved into position. Jack was at the window, keeping an eye on the street. Emma and Sam positioned themselves by the door, waiting for the first sign of movement. Then, the door crashed open. The serpents came pouring in, guns drawn and faces set in grim determination. But they weren't prepared for what they found. Sam was the first to react, firing her rifle and hitting the nearest serpent square in the chest. Jack followed, picking off another one as they rushed through the doorway. Emma was right behind them, her movements swift and precise. She took down another serpent with a well-placed shot, the man falling to the floor with a grunt. The serpents hesitated, caught off guard by the women's fierce resistance. But it didn't last long. They regrouped quickly, guns blazing as they stormed into the house. It was chaos. Gunshots rang out. The sound of breaking glass filled the air as the women and the serpents fought for control of the space. Sam's heart pounded in her chest, her focus laser-sharp as she took down another enemy. She wasn't running anymore. This time, she was fighting for her life. The serpents had made a mistake, and now they would pay for it. The fight exploded in a flurry of movement. Sam, Emma, and Jack were in the thick of it, each of them firing with precision and purpose, their bodies moving in sync like a well-oiled machine. The serpents were relentless, but the women were quicker. Every shot, every move had a purpose. There was no room for hesitation. Emma ducked behind the worn-out couch, reloading her rifle with practiced speed. She barely had time to catch her breath before a serpent lunged toward her from the door, his gun raised. Without hesitation, she fired, sending him stumbling back with a bullet in his shoulder. Sam was right beside her, moving swiftly to take down another serpent trying to flank them from the side. Her rifle kicked back with every shot, hitting her targets with deadly accuracy. There was no fear in her eyes, only the cold determination to survive, to win. Jack was doing what he did best, laying down suppressive fire. His shots rang out with a controlled fury, forcing the serpents back. He was the tactical mind of the group, always thinking 2 steps ahead. As the enemy tried to close in, Jack moved with precision, creating just enough space for the others to make their moves. For a moment, there was a lull. The remaining serpents had retreated back into the doorway, their heavy footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. Sam's chest heaved with every breath as she crouched behind the table, waiting for the next move. They were down to just a handful of enemies now, but the tension in the air was thick. "They're regrouping," Jack muttered from his position by the window. "They'll be back with reinforcements. We don't have much time." "We have to finish this now," Emma replied, her voice steely. She was already moving, heading toward the kitchen where they had hidden a few spare supplies. "We can't afford to let them get any closer." Sam glanced around, looking for an opening. They were cornered in the house, the enemy closing in from all sides. The back door was the only possible escape, but it was too risky. They'd have to fight their way through. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire shattered the silence. The serpents were making their move again, charging through the doorway with guns raised. Sam didn't hesitate this time. She fired first, hitting one of them in the leg as he tried to breach the threshold. But the serpents had numbers on their side. Another burst of gunfire rattled through the house, and Emma grunted as she felt the sharp sting of a bullet graze her arm. "Damn it," Emma hissed, but she didn't stop. She ducked low, pressing herself against the wall as she fired back. Sam's heart skipped a beat as she saw Emma's injury. "Emma, are you okay?" she shouted. But Emma waved her off, determination written all over her face. "I'm fine," she spat, gritting her teeth. "Focus on the fight." Jack had already moved toward the back of the house, planning their next move. He grabbed Sam by the arm, his voice low but urgent. "We're running out of time. We make one last push, hit them hard, and get out of here. I'll cover the door. You and Emma take the back." Sam nodded. There was no other choice. As the serpents advanced, the 3 of them knew this was their final chance. They'd been in tight situations before, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure the serpents understood that they weren't invincible. With a single nod from Jack, they charged. Sam led the way, moving faster than she'd ever moved before, her rifle ready. Emma was right behind her, firing from the hip as she made her way toward the back door. Jack covered them from the front, his shots ringing out with deadly precision. The house shook with the force of the battle. Gunshots, shouts, and the sound of breaking wood filled the air as the 3 of them pushed forward. The serpents fought back with everything they had, but Sam and the others were too determined. They reached the back door in what seemed like seconds, but it felt like hours. Sam reached for the handle, her fingers trembling, but the door swung open just in time. "Go!" Jack shouted. "I'll cover you." They ran out into the night, the cool air hitting them like a slap in the face. Sam's lungs burned, but she kept running, the sound of footsteps following them closely. The serpents weren't far behind. They reached the alleyway, darting between the narrow buildings as they tried to lose their pursuers. Sam's heart pounded as she turned the corner, her mind racing. They couldn't keep running forever. "There's a car down the street," Emma said, her voice strained but still strong. "We can take it." Sam didn't hesitate. "Let's go." The 3 of them sprinted toward the car, their legs burning with exhaustion. Sam reached the driver's side first, ripping open the door and jumping in. Emma and Jack followed quickly, slamming the doors behind them. Jack slammed his fist into the dashboard. "We've got to get out of here now." Sam gunned the engine, peeling out of the alley and speeding down the street. The serpents' motorcycles were still behind them, but they were slowing down. They'd lost them for now. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Sam's hands gripped the wheel tightly, her mind still reeling from the fight. "We're not out of the woods yet," Jack said, breaking the silence. "But we've got time. Time to figure out our next move." Sam nodded, glancing in the rearview mirror to make sure they weren't being followed. "We'll make them regret this," she said, her voice low, but with a fierce determination. Emma looked out the window, her face bruised but defiant. "They messed with the wrong women," she muttered. And Sam knew she was right. The serpents had underestimated them, and now they were going to pay the price. The streets blurred around them as the car sped through the night, each turn taking them farther from the danger they'd narrowly escaped. But even as the adrenaline began to fade, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still to come. The serpents weren't the kind to give up easily, and they would come for them. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. They didn't speak much during the drive. The weight of the battle still hung heavy in the air, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Emma had her eyes closed, her injured arm wrapped tightly in a makeshift bandage, while Jack kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, his jaw set in a grim line. Finally, Sam broke the silence. "We can't keep running like this. Sooner or later, they'll catch up with us. We need to hit them back, and we need to hit hard." Jack turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "You're right. But rushing in without a plan isn't going to do us any favors. We need to know exactly where they're holed up, who they're working with, and what resources they've got. And we need leverage," Sam added. "We can't take them on if we're going in blind." Emma's voice was soft but firm as she spoke up. "We need intel. If we can figure out who their leader is, maybe we can take out the head and make the rest of the group scatter." Jack nodded slowly. "Exactly. But getting that intel won't be easy. We're going to have to get creative." The plan was clear, but it wouldn't be easy. The serpents had already shown they weren't afraid to do whatever it took to protect themselves. They weren't just a street gang. They were a well-oiled machine, and their reach extended far beyond the city limits. They needed a strategy, something more than just brute force. Jack turned the car onto a deserted road, the familiar city lights fading behind them. "Let's head to the old warehouse I mentioned. It's a temporary safe house, but I have a contact there who might know something about the serpent's operations." Sam glanced at him. "Is this contact trustworthy?" Jack hesitated. "As trustworthy as they come. I wouldn't put us in harm's way for just anyone, but you'll need to be careful. We don't know who's listening, and I can't guarantee that we're the only ones with eyes on that place." Emma grunted, adjusting her position in the seat. "We don't have much choice. Let's go." The warehouse was tucked away in an industrial district at the edge of town, a place most people wouldn't think to look. The building was old, crumbling in some places, but it had a certain quiet strength to it, a kind of silent resistance to the world around it. Jack parked the car in the shadows of a nearby alley, and the three of them stepped out, moving quickly but cautiously. They walked toward the side entrance of the warehouse, where a lone figure stood, waiting for them. A tall, wiry man with a grizzled face and a limp. His name was Lucas, and he was a former informant for Jack, someone who knew the ins and outs of the city's underground world. But he wasn't someone Jack trusted easily, not by a long shot. Still, when you were in their line of work, you didn't always have the luxury of trusting everyone. "Jack," Lucas greeted them, his voice low and rough. "You've got guts showing up here after what happened. Thought I might be seeing your faces again, but not this soon." Sam didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We need intel on the serpents. Now." Lucas raised an eyebrow, but he didn't flinch. "Straight to business, huh? Fine. I've been keeping my ear to the ground. They've been moving product through the docks lately. High-stakes shipments, weapons, and cash. They've got a new buyer in town, someone big. If you want to hit them where it hurts, that's your best shot." "Who's the buyer?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Lucas shook his head. "I don't know the name, but I've seen the guy. Tall, dark hair. Always keeps a low profile. I've also heard whispers about a big event coming up, something the serpents are involved in. Could be the perfect time to strike." Sam stepped forward, her voice steely. "Where do we find them?" "Follow the money," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The buyer's got ties to the docks, but there's a meeting coming up in a few days. You'll get your chance then. Just be careful. The serpents don't take kindly to people poking around in their business." Jack looked at the others, then back at Lucas. "Thanks for the information. You've just made a lot of enemies." Lucas grinned, a sharp, toothy smile. I've made my peace with that. You should too. They left the warehouse with new information in hand, but the weight of the decision was still heavy on their shoulders. The plan was set, they had a lead, and now they had to follow it. The clock was ticking, and if they didn't act fast, the serpents would only grow stronger. I think we've got enough to go on, Sam said, her voice resolute. We hit the docks, find out what they're moving, and take down whoever's in charge of this operation. But we need to move fast. If we wait too long, the serpents will scatter, and we'll lose our shot. Jack nodded. Agreed. We hit them hard, take out their new buyer, and show them we're not afraid to fight back. Emma shifted in her seat, her gaze determined. We don't just fight them. We finish this, once and for all. The plan was set in motion. They had their target, their strategy, and the resolve to see it through. The serpents had made their mistake. They'd underestimated these women. They thought they could intimidate them, crush them underfoot. But they were wrong. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. The air was thick with tension as Sam, Jack, and Emma set their sights on the serpents' operation at the docks. Every move had to be calculated, every detail meticulously thought through. They couldn't afford any mistakes. They met in a dimly lit room beneath a forgotten corner of the city, a place that had served as a base of operations more times than Sam cared to count. Maps of the docks were sprawled across the table, each of them marked with red X's and notes in Jack's precise handwriting. We hit them at midnight, Jack said, his voice calm but commanding. The meeting is supposed to happen right here. He tapped the map, his finger tracing a route to a large warehouse near the waterfront. Sam leaned forward, studying the layout. How many people are we talking about? Serpents are never alone, Jack replied. But from what I've gathered, it's mostly their regular crew. A dozen or so. They'll have security in place, but they're not expecting us to show up. Not yet. We can't just walk in there guns blazing, Sam said. We need a way to neutralize their guards first. Emma, who had been silently examining the docks map, pointed to a building on the opposite side of the warehouse. There's a vantage point here, across the street. If we can get in without them seeing us, we can take out their sentries without a single shot. Jack nodded, impressed. That's exactly what I was thinking. We take out the perimeter, then move in quick, neutralize the buyer, and make sure no one gets out alive. Sam's expression hardened. This is it. No more games. The night of the operation arrived, and the city was alive with the usual hum of activity. But for Sam, Emma, and Jack, the air felt heavier than usual. They were about to face their biggest challenge yet. They made their way to the docks, a quiet tension building with every step. Sam's heart pounded, her fingers tightening around her rifle. She could feel the weight of the mission settling on her shoulders. As they approached the vantage point, Emma led the way, moving silently through the shadows. The darkness concealed them as they set up their position, an old abandoned building that gave them a perfect view of the warehouse. The sound of waves lapping against the shore was the only noise as they settled into place. We wait for the signal, Jack said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Sam's mind raced as she watched the perimeter, her senses on high alert. They were close. Too close. Finally, a figure appeared near the warehouse, a silhouette moving quickly, clearly expecting someone. The buyer had arrived. That's our guy, Emma muttered, her hand gripping her rifle tightly. Sam nodded. Wait for it. The first shot rang out like a thunderclap in the dead of night. It came from the rooftop across the street, the sound echoing in the empty expanse of the docks. A serpent guard crumpled to the ground, a single bullet through the head. The perimeter was breached. Sam moved first, signaling Emma and Jack to follow her. They descended from their vantage point, moving with swift precision, their steps soundless on the pavement. They had a small window of time before the serpents realized what had happened. The door to the warehouse was locked, but Emma was already ahead, slicing through the lock with a knife she kept hidden. In moments, they were inside, and the darkness of the warehouse greeted them with an eerie silence. They moved carefully through the interior, using the shadows as cover. The soft clink of metal echoed off the walls as they approached the main room. Sam's breath caught in her throat as she saw the buyer. He was a tall man, dark-haired, and wearing a long black coat that seemed to absorb the light around him. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by several serpents, who were busy unloading crates of weapons and supplies. "On my mark," Jack whispered, his voice cold with intent. Sam's finger hovered over the trigger, her focus entirely on the man in the center. She could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her. This wasn't just about taking down a gang. This was about sending a message. She took a breath. Now. The chaos erupted instantly. Gunshots filled the air as Sam, Emma, and Jack unleashed hell. The serpents didn't have time to react as they were mowed down one by one, their bodies dropping to the ground in a swift and deadly barrage. The buyer was moving too, ducking behind one of the crates, but he wasn't fast enough. Emma fired first, hitting a guard in the chest. Then Sam followed up, taking down another. Jack moved in the opposite direction, making sure no one could escape through the back. The buyer, realizing the battle was lost, tried to run, but Sam was already in pursuit. She moved quickly, cutting him off before he could reach the back exit. The look in his eyes was a mix of disbelief and fear. He hadn't expected resistance like this. "You've made a huge mistake," Sam said, her voice calm, but full of menace. The buyer's lips curled into a grimace. "You think you've won? You have no idea who you're messing with." Sam didn't wait for him to finish. In one fluid motion, she raised her gun and fired, sending the buyer crumpling to the floor. He was gone, just like that. The warehouse was silent once more, the sounds of the battle fading into the night. Sam stood over the buyer's body, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the fight. But this wasn't over. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from done. Jack approached her, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Nice shot." Sam didn't respond right away. Her mind was still processing everything. "We've taken down the buyer, but the serpents will retaliate. They're not done yet." Emma joined them, her expression hard. "We've crippled their operation for now, but they'll be back, and next time, they'll come harder." Sam nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "Then we'll be ready." They left the docks without another word, the weight of the mission heavy on their shoulders. But one thing was clear. They had sent a message to the serpents. They were not to be underestimated. They'd messed with the wrong women. The calm that followed their strike at the docks was short-lived. As dawn broke over the city, the consequences of their actions began to settle in. Sam, Jack, and Emma had delivered a powerful blow to the serpents, but the gang's reach was far too wide for them to go unnoticed for long. The morning after the raid, the trio gathered in a rundown apartment, the windows tightly closed to keep out prying eyes. Sam paced back and forth, her mind still racing. They'd dealt with the buyer, but now the serpents would retaliate. They didn't take losses lightly, and Sam knew this was just the beginning. "We've stirred the hornet's nest," Sam muttered, her eyes scanning the room. "We've got a target on our backs now." Jack, who had been sitting quietly at the table, studying a map of the city, looked up. "You're right. They'll come for us, and they won't stop until we're dealt with." Emma, nursing a cup of coffee, added, "They're going to be pissed, but we've got their attention now. The question is, what's their next move?" "That's what we need to figure out," Sam replied. "They've got resources, allies, and a network. We can't just wait around for them to find us. We need to take the fight to them before they regroup." Jack stood up and started pacing as well. "We know where their muscle is. But the key to taking them down is their leader. We still don't know who's pulling the strings behind the scenes, and until we do, this will just be a series of skirmishes." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll let us find their leader that easily?" "No," Sam said, her tone sharp. "But we have to keep pushing. If we keep hitting them where it hurts, they'll have no choice but to reveal their hand." That evening, as the sun set and the shadows of the city grew longer, the first sign of retaliation came. A message, simple and brutal. It wasn't a phone call or a letter. It was a warning. Sam had just stepped out of the shower when the loud crash of a window breaking echoed through the apartment. She barely had time to react before a series of gunshots rang out, shattering the peace of the night. Glass scattered across the floor, and Sam dove for cover, her heart racing as the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. "They're here," Emma shouted, scrambling for her weapon. Jack was already at the window, peering through the blinds. "It's a small group, maybe 4 or 5, he said, his voice low and calm. "They're not here to negotiate." Sam reached for her own gun, her mind already working on the next move. "We can't fight them here. We need to get out." Jack nodded, moving quickly toward the back exit. "Follow me. We're not letting them corner us." The trio made their way through the darkened streets, staying off the main roads and weaving through alleyways. Their hearts pounded as they moved swiftly, the tension of the chase driving them forward. The serpents were hot on their heels, but Sam wasn't about to let them catch up. They arrived at a safe house, a nondescript building in the industrial district that had served as a temporary hideout for the last few days. It was far enough off the beaten path that no one would think to look for them there, but they knew it wouldn't be long before the serpents would figure it out. The doors slammed shut behind them, and for the moment, they were safe. But the sense of security was fleeting. Sam exhaled sharply, her pulse still racing. "They're escalating. We've made a serious enemy now." Emma dropped her bag onto the floor and sat heavily on the couch, rubbing her eyes. "They won't stop until we're gone. We need to figure out what their next move is." Jack had already begun setting up a plan. "We need to track their movements. We've got a few days before they regroup. We use that time to go on the offensive. We hit them before they hit us again." The days following the first attack were a blur of planning and preparation. Jack worked on gathering intel, talking to old contacts who might have information about the serpent's movements. Sam and Emma set up surveillance, watching key locations and waiting for any sign of weakness. But despite their best efforts, the serpents seemed to be one step ahead. Every lead they followed seemed to vanish just when they thought they had something concrete. It wasn't until they received a tip from an unlikely source, Lucas, the informant from the warehouse, that they caught their break. Lucas showed up late one night at the safe house, his face grim. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "They're planning something big," he said. "A major shipment of arms is coming into town. It's going down at the docks again, same place as last time. But this time, they've got more muscle, heavier weapons, and backup from other gangs." Sam's eyes narrowed. "When?" "Tomorrow night," Lucas replied. "If you want to hit them again, that's your chance. But be prepared. They're going to be expecting you this time." The clock was ticking. Sam, Jack, and Emma knew they had one shot at taking down the serpents for good. The night of the shipment was their final chance. The night of the planned shipment was upon them. The docks, once again, would be the battleground where Sam, Jack, and Emma faced their greatest challenge. This time, they were determined to finish what they had started. No more running, no more waiting. Tonight, the serpents would either fall or make their last stand. The team met one final time in the safe house. Sam felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins, but there was something different about this night. The weight of the upcoming battle pressed down on her, and she knew they couldn't afford any mistakes. They were walking into the lion's den. Jack was already poring over the new intel Lucas had brought. "They've doubled the guards this time," he said, glancing up. "And they've got bigger firepower. If we go in the same way as last time, we'll get pinned down." "So we changed the approach," Sam replied, her voice steady. "We can't afford to be predictable. We split up. Emma, you and I will hit the back entrance, take out their communications. Jack, you go around the front. The moment you get the signal, we converge on the shipment." Emma nodded, her expression set in determination. "You got it." Sam turned to Jack. "Keep your head down. If we're going to survive this, we have to be surgical." Jack grinned, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Surgical, huh? You know I don't do subtle, but I'll keep the noise to a minimum." Sam smiled, her lips curling into a thin line. "Keep it down, Jack. This is it. No going back." The docks loomed ahead as the team made their way toward the target. The night was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the city and the soft crash of waves against the pier. Sam's senses were heightened, every shadow seeming to move, every noise amplified. The serpents were expecting them, but they didn't know when or from where. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. They moved like ghosts through the alleyways, each of them keeping to the shadows, their breaths steady but urgent. They knew the plan, and they knew what was at stake. Sam's mind raced through every possible outcome, preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. This wasn't just a mission. It was personal now. As they approached the back entrance of the warehouse, Emma paused. She signaled to Sam, then peered around the corner. 2 guards stood at the door, clearly not expecting trouble. Sam nodded. It was time. In one swift motion, Emma drew her gun and silenced one of the guards with a clean shot to the chest. The second guard barely had time to react before Sam moved in, knocking him unconscious with a swift blow to the head. They were in. The warehouse was massive, the air thick with the smell of oil, metal, and sea salt. The crates of weapons were stacked high, and the shadows of figures moved through the aisles. But the shipment wasn't due for another hour, and the serpents hadn't yet realized they were being hunted. "Time to move," Sam whispered, as she and Emma crept deeper into the warehouse. They reached the communications room in the back. Inside, 2 men were busy monitoring security feeds. Sam knew this was their chance to cripple the serpent's response. Emma was already setting up her equipment to disable the security system. Without a word, Emma worked quickly, tapping into the wiring with practiced hands. The monitors flickered and died as the system was cut off from the outside world. The serpents were blind. Meanwhile, Jack had taken his position outside. He was watching the front of the warehouse, waiting for the signal to make his move. He couldn't help but feel the thrill of the hunt coursing through him, but he kept his focus sharp. The serpents were about to realize something was wrong, and when they did, it would be too late. His comms crackled in his ear. "We're good to go," Emma's voice said, steady and calm. Jack smiled. "It's showtime." He moved toward the front of the warehouse, where 2 serpents were guarding the main entrance. They were focused on their walkie-talkies, oblivious to the fact that their entire operation was about to implode. Jack was quick. He took out the first guard with a shot to the leg, and the second didn't even see him coming before he was knocked unconscious with a well-placed punch. "Now!" Sam's voice came through the comms, and within moments, everything erupted into chaos. The serpents were no longer in control. The first wave of Sam and Emma's attack was swift, cutting through the remaining guards like a blade through butter. With the communications down, they were on their own, and they had no idea where the threat was coming from. Jack entered from the front, taking down the last few guards with lethal efficiency. The air was thick with tension, every movement calculated, every shot deliberate. The warehouse was a war zone now, and Sam could feel the heat of battle in her bones. As they made their way toward the shipment, Sam's eyes locked onto the target, an armored truck, guarded by a group of tough-looking serpents. They were ready to make their escape, but they hadn't counted on Sam and her team. "Take them down," Sam shouted, her gun already raised as she moved toward the truck. The firefight was brutal, a standoff of precision and power. Sam, Jack, and Emma moved as one, taking out serpent after serpent with ruthless efficiency. It wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making sure the serpents could never rise again. The last of the serpent guards fell, and the warehouse grew eerily quiet. They had won again. But as they approached the truck, Sam noticed something strange. The driver was still in the cab, his hands tight on the wheel, but he wasn't moving. "I don't like this," Sam muttered under her breath. Jack moved forward cautiously, keeping his gun trained on the driver. "Stay sharp." The driver suddenly turned, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "You really think it's over?" Before Sam could react, the truck's back doors swung open, and a dozen more serpents poured out, guns blazing. The explosion of gunfire hit them like a wave. Sam had barely enough time to react before the sound of bullets ripping through the air filled the space. The serpents had outsmarted them, again. The moment the truck's back doors opened, it was clear. This wasn't a shipment at all. It was a trap. Sam's instincts kicked in, and she immediately dove for cover behind a stack of crates. The sound of bullets ricocheted off the metal, splintering the wood around her. Jack and Emma were already in position, ducking behind whatever they could find, their weapons drawn. The serpents had set up a perfect ambush, and now the 3 of them were caught in the crossfire. "Get to the truck," Sam shouted over the roar of gunfire. She could barely hear her own voice as she crawled from her cover to the next set of crates. She had to get to the truck. It was their only chance to escape. They could still salvage the mission, but only if they kept their cool. Jack fired off a few shots from his position, taking down one of the attackers, but the number of serpents seemed endless. They were spread out, taking full advantage of the warehouse's maze-like layout. Emma returned fire, her shots precise, but even she couldn't keep up with the constant barrage of enemies coming from every angle. "They're closing in," Emma called, her voice tight with strain. "We've got to move now." Sam looked at the truck, its engine still running. The plan had been simple: take out the shipment, hit the serpents hard, and get out. But now, they were on the defensive, trying to escape a full-on ambush. "Move to the truck," Sam ordered again, this time more urgently. The longer they stayed here, the higher the chances were they wouldn't make it out. They scrambled toward the truck, dodging bullets and moving quickly between cover. Sam kept her head low, her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct told her to fight, take out as many as she could and make a stand. But the mission wasn't over yet, and survival had to come first. As they reached the truck, Jack opened the door and jumped into the driver's seat. "Let's go," he yelled, gunning the engine. But the truck wasn't going anywhere. The moment Jack started the engine, the tires spun, and they were immediately pinned down. A large barricade had been set up at the front of the loading dock, blocking any escape. "We're stuck?" Jack shouted, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. Sam's mind raced. They were trapped in the warehouse, surrounded by enemies who knew the place like the back of their hand. The barricade meant no easy escape. They couldn't afford to sit here and wait for the serpents to close in. They needed to break out now. "Get out of the truck," Sam ordered. "We'll fight our way out." They had no time to argue. In one fluid motion, Sam kicked open the truck's door and bolted out, taking cover behind a nearby pillar. Jack and Emma followed, sticking close to her. The three of them were back in the thick of it, taking aim at any serpent who showed their face. But the odds were stacked against them. For every one serpent they took down, two more seemed to appear in their place. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and with each passing minute, their options were narrowing. The tension was unbearable, and the sense of urgency only made the stakes higher. "We've got to make a break for it," Sam said between gunshots. "Head toward the back exit." Emma nodded, her focus razor-sharp. "I'll cover you. Let's move." The plan was simple: make a run for the back exit and hope they could break through the warehouse's security gate. The serpents hadn't anticipated a full-on firefight, but Sam had learned the hard way. Plans never went according to schedule. They made their move, darting from cover to cover, barely evading the hail of gunfire aimed at them. The back exit was only 100 yards away, but it might as well have been miles with the kind of firepower coming at them. Jack, leading the way, was the first to reach the back door. He shot the lock off and pushed the door open. "Get in," he yelled. But before they could make it through, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. The lights went out, plunging them into darkness. "Damn it," Sam cursed, her senses heightened as the sound of movement in the dark grew louder. The serpents were making their final move. And then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, larger than life. It was a man, dressed in all black, his face hidden behind a mask. Sam's blood ran cold. This wasn't just any serpent. This was their leader. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. All of their planning, all their strategy, it had led them right into the hands of the one person they had been trying to find. The man spoke, his voice low and cold. "You've made a mistake, trying to take what's mine." Sam tightened her grip on her gun. "Who are you?" The figure chuckled darkly. "You'll learn soon enough." Before Sam could react, he raised his hand, signaling his men. The warehouse filled with the unmistakable sound of the serpents closing in, their footsteps loud and deliberate. Sam's team was surrounded once again, but this time, it was different. This time, the real battle was just beginning. Jack and Emma exchanged a brief glance. They had no way out. They had walked right into the lion's den, and now, the lion was awake. Sam could feel the walls closing in. They had come too far to back down now. It was either fight their way out or die trying. The tension was unbearable. Sam, Jack, and Emma were trapped, surrounded by serpents with nowhere to run. The figure before them, their leader, stood tall and imposing. His voice was smooth, but there was no mistaking the danger in his words. "You've caused a lot of trouble for me," the leader said, his tone almost too calm, too controlled. But I think we can work something out. Sam's mind raced. He was offering something. But what? Was this a trap? Was he playing with them before he struck the final blow? We're not here to make deals, Sam said, her voice firm despite the swirling uncertainty in her chest. You're going down. This ends tonight. The leader's eyes glinted behind his mask. Oh, I think you'll change your mind. You're in a position where you don't have a choice. He stepped forward, and the serpents behind him closed the gap, weapons raised. But Sam noticed something else, something that caught her off guard. A faint glimmer of hesitation in the leader's posture. It was subtle, but it was there. Jack, never one to stay silent, scoffed. You're not as smart as you think, buddy. The leader didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to his men. Hold them. The serpents moved in, grabbing Sam, Jack, and Emma, pulling their arms behind their backs and forcing them onto their knees in front of their leader. Sam fought against their grip, but they were too strong. The leader paced before them, his hands behind his back, as though he were contemplating something. Here's the thing, he said, finally breaking the silence. You've made my life difficult, but you're also valuable. You've taken out a lot of my men, and I have to admit, that's impressive. But you're also creating a lot of problems, and I need them solved. So, I'm offering you a choice. Sam stared up at him, every muscle in her body tensed. What kind of choice? He smirked. I'm offering you your lives. You walk away, and I'll let you go. No harm done. You get out, and I'll forget you ever existed. You can go back to whatever pathetic little life you had before this. If you're smart enough to do so. There it was. The offer of survival. The chance to escape, to leave this mess behind, and live to fight another day. Sam could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Jack's eyes narrowed. And if we don't take your offer? The leader's smile widened. Then you die right here. But I'm guessing you already know that. Sam's mind spun, but deep down, she knew there was more to this than just an offer of escape. The leader wasn't just looking to save face. He was offering them a chance for survival because he needed them. There was something bigger at play here, something he wanted from them. But what? She glanced at Jack and Emma. Neither of them had any intention of just surrendering, but Sam could see the conflict in their eyes. This was a deadly game they were caught in, and their options were rapidly running out. Why us? Sam asked, her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding in her chest. Why offer us a way out? The leader's eyes gleamed with something like amusement. Because you're not just any threat. You're the kind of people who can shake the foundations of an empire. And right now, that's exactly what I need. It hit her then. The serpents weren't just a gang. They weren't just involved in petty smuggling or street-level crime. They were part of something much larger, something much darker. The leader's words had been cryptic, but they weren't a bluff. You're not just trying to control the city, Sam said, slowly piecing the puzzle together. You're trying to control everything. The leader nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. Smart. But let's not pretend you can just walk away from this. I have a lot of enemies, people who want to see me burn, and I need people like you to help me take them down. You can join me, and together, we'll crush them all. Sam's heart skipped a beat. He was asking them to join him. The offer was tempting, in a way. If they aligned with him, they could have access to power, resources, and influence like they'd never known. They could take down the serpent's rivals, reshape the criminal world on their terms. But at what cost? She knew the kind of person this leader was. He wouldn't be content with just surviving. He would want it all. Power, control, people's lives. Jack scoffed. You think we're just going to help you take over the city? You're crazy. We've spent this whole time trying to stop people like you. The leader smiled, though there was no warmth in it. You don't have a choice, Jack. You're here, and you're already in too deep. You don't think I haven't seen the way you've been moving through my operation, tearing it apart piece by piece? You're either with me, or you're dead. The room was silent for a long moment, tension so thick that it felt suffocating. Sam could feel the weight of the decision, and her mind churned, searching for any other option. Emma's voice cut through the silence. What if we just kill you now and take our chances? The leader's eyes locked on her, and for the first time, His expression faltered. You really want to try that? You'd be dead before you got the chance. Sam could see the tension rising in the room, but there was something more in the leader's words. This wasn't just a power play. It was an invitation. He wanted them to be part of something bigger, to join him in his bid for power. But the cost of that would be their souls. Sam took a deep breath, thinking quickly. There had to be a way to turn this around, to make the leader think he had won, while they planned their escape. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Sam's mind raced as she weighed the options. The leader was offering them a way out, an opportunity to join his operation, to become part of his empire. But she knew better than to take anything at face value. This wasn't just about survival. It was about power, control, and manipulation. He wanted them on his side, not because he admired their skills, but because he saw them as tools to help him dominate his enemies. And Sam wasn't the type of person who would let herself be used. But there was something else, something she couldn't ignore. The leader was confident, maybe even too confident. His plan was unfolding in front of them, but Sam could feel a weakness, a crack in his armor. If they played their cards right, they could turn the tables on him. It was a dangerous gamble, but they didn't have much of a choice. Let me get this straight, Sam said, her voice steady, betraying none of the tension she was feeling. You want us to join you and help you crush your enemies? That's your big plan? The leader's smile remained unwavering. I'm not asking for your help. I'm offering you a chance to survive. You don't have the luxury of choices right now. Jack's hand twitched, as if he was about to make a move. Sam shot him a look, one that said, wait. This was a delicate moment. The wrong move could mean their end. Sam leaned in slightly, making sure her voice was low but still clear. So, what happens if we refuse your offer? What's your plan for us then? The leader's eyes gleamed as he stepped closer. Then you die. Simple as that. But I'm offering you more than just your life. I'm offering you power. You've seen what I can do. Imagine what we could accomplish together. There it was again, power. The one thing the leader truly craved. But Sam wasn't sure if he knew just how much power he had already given them. He was too focused on the immediate threat of his enemies to realize he was making a critical mistake. He'd underestimated them before, and he was doing it again. Right, Sam said, narrowing her eyes. And if we take your offer, what exactly would we be doing for you? Cleaning up your mess? The leader's smile faded slightly, and Sam noticed a flash of something behind his eyes. You'll help me secure the future of this operation. We'll wipe out anyone who stands in our way. And when it's all said and done, you'll have everything you've ever wanted. Sam could feel the pressure mounting. The leader was trying to manipulate them, to paint a picture of a future that seemed too good to be true. But she knew that it wasn't about them. It was about him. He needed them for his own personal gain. She couldn't just walk away and leave everything to chance. She had to turn this around. She had to make him believe they were on his side, even if it meant playing along for now. All right, Sam said, her voice low and controlled. We'll do it. But we need one thing before we agree. The leader raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? We want a guarantee, Sam continued. If we're going to join you, we need to know that you won't double-cross us once we've outlived our usefulness. The leader chuckled darkly. You think I would betray you? He took a step back, surveying them as though he were considering something. Fine, I'll give you what you want. But know this, you'll be under my control. You play by my rules or you die. Sam nodded, though internally, she was far from satisfied. But it was a risk they had to take. Playing the leader's game would give them the time they needed to find an opening, a weak spot they could exploit. Good, she said, her voice steady. We're in. But remember, we're watching you. The leader's smirk returned. I like you, Sam. You've got spirit. I'll make sure you're well taken care of. The tension in the room was palpable as the serpents started to lower their weapons. Sam, Jack, and Emma exchanged a brief glance. They had done it. They had bought themselves some time. But now, they needed to find a way out, and fast. The leader motioned to one of his men. Get them cleaned up and ready for the next phase of the operation. We'll be moving out soon. Sam, Jack, and Emma were led away from the warehouse and into a sleek, black SUV that was waiting outside. The driver didn't speak a word as they were taken to a hidden location deep in the city. Sam kept her eyes focused, watching the streets as they drove, trying to memorize every turn, every landmark. She needed to know where they were going. They couldn't afford to trust the leader completely, not yet. The SUV finally came to a stop in front of a large, secure building, fortified, with high walls and surveillance cameras. It was the kind of place you'd expect a criminal mastermind to call home. The leader's base of operations. They were escorted inside, past heavily armed guards, and led into a large conference room where the leader was waiting. His chair was positioned at the head of a long, dark wood table, and he looked every bit the part of the ruthless leader he claimed to be. "Welcome," he said, standing as they entered. "I trust you've made your decision?" Sam stood her ground, refusing to let her guard down. "We're here, but we're not blindly following orders." The leader's smile tightened. "Of course. I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, let's talk business." And that was when Sam saw it. The one thing she had been hoping to spot. A loose end. There was a piece of paper on the table, covered in strange symbols and coordinates. It didn't take long for her to recognize it. A map? A map that led to something important. Something the leader had been hiding. The map was a critical piece of the puzzle, and Sam's instincts told her that it could be the key to everything. The leader had made a mistake by leaving it in plain sight. It was just a piece of paper, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with Sam. Those coordinates, the strange symbols, it wasn't just a map. It was something much more important. As she stood there, staring at the map on the leader's desk, her mind raced. She could take it. No one was watching closely enough, but the consequences of doing so would be enormous. If she took it and the leader found out, he wouldn't just kill her. He would make sure the others suffered as well. But the potential payoff was worth the risk. If she could figure out what the map led to, they could use it to their advantage. It could be the leverage they needed to finally take the leader down, or at least force him to make a mistake. Jack leaned in, his voice low. "What's going on, Sam? What's on that map?" "I don't know yet," Sam whispered back, glancing around the room. The leader was still talking to Emma, outlining the next steps of their involvement. "But I'm about to find out." Sam's heart pounded as she inched closer to the table. The room felt like it was closing in on her, every sound amplified. The soft ticking of a clock in the corner, the distant hum of the building's air conditioning, the creak of the wooden floor beneath her boots. She reached for the map slowly, carefully, her hand trembling slightly with the weight of what she was about to do. She grabbed it and quickly folded it into her jacket. No one noticed. For a brief moment, it felt as if the world had paused, and Sam held her breath, praying the risk would pay off. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, his voice a little too loud, drawing the leader's attention. The leader raised an eyebrow. "Everything's fine," Sam said quickly, giving him a calm smile. She kept her hand close to her jacket, praying that the map was hidden well enough. "Good," the leader replied, his eyes sharp but his tone casual. "Then let's get started. I've got work to do." The rest of the meeting was a blur. The leader gave them vague instructions about what their next mission would be. Something about breaking into a rival gang's compound, eliminating threats, and securing some sort of shipment. It didn't matter. Sam wasn't focused on his words anymore. All she could think about was the map. Once the meeting ended, they were escorted back to their rooms. Sam, Jack, and Emma sat in their small, windowless quarters, the air thick with tension. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, Sam wasted no time. She pulled the map from her jacket and spread it out on the bed. The symbols were strange. Some looked like old-world runes, others like maps to underground tunnels or hidden bunkers. There were several locations marked with X's. Some of them were in the city, but others were far outside the urban sprawl, in isolated areas, deep in forests or mountains. Sam's fingers hovered over the map as she traced the lines, trying to make sense of it all. Emma leaned over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she studied the symbols. "This is some kind of treasure map. But treasure for who?" Sam shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not good. The leader's hiding something, and he wants us to help him find it." Jack paced the room, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "This is bigger than we thought. We were just trying to stop a gang. Now we're tangled up in something that could bring down entire empires. We need to figure out what's really going on here, Sam." I agree, Sam said, her eyes still fixed on the map. She paused, studying one of the X marks. It was located in a remote mountain range, miles away from the city. This place. It could be where he's hiding his real operation. Whatever he's really after, it's out there. Emma looked up at her, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. Then we need to get there first. We can't let him get whatever it is he's after. We stop him before he has a chance to put his plan into motion. Sam nodded. Exactly. We need to move fast. If we can get to that location before the serpents do, we might just have a shot at taking him down. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. They gathered what supplies they could, guns, knives, anything they could carry without drawing attention. They knew they had to act quickly. If they waited too long, the leader would figure out they were up to something. Jack's voice cut through the silence as they packed. What if he's already there? He's not, Sam said firmly. Not yet. I can feel it. He's too focused on getting us to do his dirty work. We have the advantage. By the time they were ready to leave, the night had fallen and the building was quiet. They slipped out through a back exit, careful not to alert the guards or raise suspicion. The map was folded neatly in Sam's pocket, and with each step, she felt the weight of their mission settle on her shoulders. They were on their way to confront the leader's hidden operation, to uncover whatever he was hiding, and to stop it before it was too late. The car ride was long and uneventful, taking them farther from the city and into the wilds of the surrounding mountains. Sam tried to stay calm, but every turn of the road, every passing mile, made her feel as if they were getting closer to something monumental. As the car crept along a narrow dirt road, Sam felt a growing sense of unease. The place they were heading to didn't feel like just another abandoned hideout. It felt like a place where something truly dangerous was waiting. And for the first time since all this began, Sam wasn't sure if they were ready for what they were about to face. They finally arrived at the location marked on the map. It was a remote, isolated compound nestled in the mountains, hidden away from prying eyes. The place was old, rusted fencing, crumbling buildings, and a large, imposing structure in the center. It was a fortress of sorts, one that had clearly been abandoned for years, but still maintained. Jack looked over at Sam, his face grim. This is it. This is where it all comes to a head. Sam nodded. Let's move in and get what we came for. We're not leaving without answers. The compound loomed ahead, dark and silent under the moonlit sky. The wind whistled through the trees, sending a chill up Sam's spine. They had arrived, but now came the real challenge. Getting inside would be the easy part compared to what they would find once they were in. Sam glanced at Jack and Emma, who were both ready for action. Jack had already checked his weapons, his revolver, knife, and a couple of grenades. Emma had strapped a small handgun to her thigh, and Sam had tucked her own knife in a sheath on her boot. They weren't here for a friendly conversation. Ready? Sam whispered, her voice low. Jack gave a sharp nod. As ready as we'll ever be. Emma gripped her gun tighter. Let's do this. Sam nodded and took the first step forward, moving cautiously toward the edge of the compound. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, as if the night itself was conspiring to hide the dangers ahead. Sam's senses were on high alert, scanning every corner of the compound for any sign of movement. They crept along the perimeter, staying low and avoiding the occasional spotlight that swept the area. The walls of the compound were high, but there were several gaps in the fencing, places where the metal had rusted through, creating just enough space to slip through unnoticed. We go through there, Sam whispered, pointing toward a section of the fence where the metal was barely hanging on. It was their best bet for entering without attracting attention. They reached the spot, and Jack went first, crouching low as he squeezed through the gap. Sam followed, then Emma. They were inside. The compound was eerily quiet. The faint sound of a generator humming in the distance was the only noise that broke the silence. They moved through the dark, taking cover behind crumbling walls and rusted vehicles. Sam's mind raced as she thought about the map. They were close. She could feel it. But what exactly were they going to find? We need to find the main building, Sam said in a hushed tone. That's where the leader's operation is, and that's where we'll get our answers. Emma nodded, glancing around nervously. This place is giving me the creeps. It's too quiet. Jack, ever the skeptic, scowled. I don't like it either. They're hiding something here. Sam led the way, her instincts guiding her as she moved toward the center of the compound. As they got closer to the main building, they saw more signs of life. Guards patrolling the area. Sam could see them through the windows of a nearby building, their silhouettes outlined in the dim light. There was no doubt now. The leader was here. This wasn't just a decoy. She motioned for the others to follow her as she ducked down behind a stack of crates. They waited for the guards to pass, hearts pounding in their chests. After a tense few moments, the coast was clear. Now's our chance, Sam whispered. We move fast. Keep low. They sprinted toward the main building, staying in the shadows. The closer they got, the more they could feel the weight of what they were about to uncover. This place was full of secrets, and Sam was certain that the leader's real operation was happening right here. They reached the door of the building, which was partially ajar. Sam pushed it open slowly, her hand on the handle. The door creaked, and she winced at the noise, praying no one would hear it. The room inside was dark, lit only by the faint glow of red emergency lights. Inside, they found what they had been looking for, a massive control center. Computer monitors lined the walls, and a group of armed guards were stationed at various points, watching over the operation. At the center of the room was a large table, cluttered with documents, maps, and blueprints. Sam's eyes locked onto the papers on the table. There it was again, the map, but now it was surrounded by even more documents, ones that looked more official. Corporate logos, government seals. This wasn't just a criminal operation. This was something much bigger. Sam, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. What is all this? Sam scanned the papers, her mind racing. I think this is bigger than we thought. These aren't just street gangs we're dealing with. This looks like a covert operation. The leader isn't just running a criminal empire. He's tied into something far more dangerous. Jack cursed under his breath. So he's been working with the government? Or someone else? Sam didn't answer right away. She reached for one of the papers on the table, scanning it quickly. There, in black and white, was a name that made her stomach drop. This is connected to the same people who funded the Serpent's Rise. The people we've been trying to stop all along. Emma shook her head. This is bad. Really bad. How far does this go? We need to find the leader, Sam said urgently. And we need to find out exactly what he's been working on. Whatever it is, it's not just about money or power. It's bigger. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed open, and guards poured in, weapons raised. Sam's heart jumped into her throat as she grabbed her gun. But it was too late. The guards had them surrounded. The leader stepped into the room, his expression cold and calculating. You really thought you could get away with this, didn't you? The tension in the room was suffocating. Sam's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. They were trapped, and the leader knew it. But Sam refused to back down. She had come this far. They had uncovered his secret, and now it was time to end this once and for all. What are you planning, leader? Sam demanded, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. What is all of this? The leader's lips twisted into a cruel smile. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just about me or you. This is about control, worldwide control. You've been playing into my hands this whole time, and now you're in way over your heads. The room was thick with tension, the air buzzing with the sound of imminent violence. The leader's cold smile sent a chill down Sam's spine. He knew they were cornered, and he was enjoying every moment of their discomfort. Sam gripped her gun tighter, but she didn't make a move. Not yet. They needed information, answers. And she knew that if she tried to fight their way out now, they would never get the truth. Jack, always the strategist, seemed to be thinking the same thing. He met Sam's eyes, and they exchanged a brief, silent glance. It was a moment of understanding between them. If they were going to make it out of this alive, they needed to get the leader talking, distract him long enough to make their move. So, what is it you're really after? Sam asked, trying to keep her voice steady. This isn't just about control of a few cities, is it? You're part of something much bigger than that. The leader's smile only widened. You're not as stupid as you look. You're right. This isn't about petty gang wars or street-level crime. This is about reshaping the world, Sam. About taking control of the systems that hold everything together. And now, you've stumbled into my operation. It's too late for you to back out now. Sam's mind raced as she tried to process his words. Reshaping the world? What was he talking about? Was he working with some kind of powerful organization, or was he trying to build something on his own? Either way, this was a threat on a scale they couldn't have imagined. You think we're just going to let you do this? Jack shot back, his voice harsh. We're taking you down, no matter what. You're not going to get away with this. The leader's expression shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as he sized them up. You think you're in control, Jack? You're not. You never were. It's already too late for you. He motioned toward the guards who had surrounded them. They took a step closer, but Sam quickly assessed the situation. If she acted now, she might be able to use the chaos to their advantage. But she couldn't do it alone. They had to work together, quickly. Without warning, she lunged toward the nearest guard, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. The man grunted in pain and staggered, giving Sam just enough room to snatch his weapon from its holster. She spun around, pointing the gun at the leader. Now, you're going to tell us everything, Sam said, her voice cold. Where is this operation headed? Who else is involved? And what exactly is your plan? The leader's smirk faltered for a split second, his eyes flicking nervously between Sam and the guards. But then, he regained his composure. You think you can stop me? I've already won. You're just pawns in my game. Just as Sam thought she might break through, the door to the room crashed open again. More guards flooded in, their weapons raised, and the leader's smirk returned. This time, it wasn't just a small squad. It was a full-on assault force. Sam's heart raced as she realized they were about to be overwhelmed. But then something unexpected happened. From the corner of the room, a shadow moved. Without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound was the rapid breathing of Sam and the others, and the tense shuffling of guards trying to adjust to the sudden change. And then came the unmistakable sound of a silenced shot. One of the guards dropped to the ground with a soft thud. A bullet wound in his forehead. Panic spread through the room like wildfire, and the remaining guards hesitated for a moment. The darkness seemed to heighten their confusion, and Sam didn't waste a second. Move, Sam shouted, grabbing Jack and Emma by the arm. The three of them darted toward the side of the room, using the confusion to their advantage. Jack fired his weapon, taking out another guard who had tried to block their exit. As they rushed toward the back exit, Sam's mind raced. Who had just fired that shot? They weren't alone. Someone had been watching them. And now, they had an ally. They burst into the hallway, the door slamming behind them as they sprinted toward the compound's back exit. But as they rounded a corner, they stopped dead in their tracks. Standing in front of them was a woman in tactical gear, her gun trained on them. I thought you might need a little help, the woman said, her voice calm and controlled. Sam's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the woman. Lena, she asked in disbelief. Lena was an old contact from Sam's past, someone she had worked with briefly years ago. But their paths had diverged, and Sam hadn't seen her since the fallout with her previous mission. It seemed Lena was still in the game, and had just saved their lives. I didn't know what you were walking into, Lena said, lowering her gun. But I knew it was big. I've been tracking this operation for months. The leader, he's just a pawn. There's a much bigger play at hand here, and I'm betting you've got some pieces of the puzzle. Sam's mind was spinning. So, you've been watching us this whole time? Why didn't you show up sooner? Lena gave a small shrug. Had to make sure I could trust you first. And now? I think it's time we take down the real players behind all this. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place. The leader wasn't the mastermind. He was just a tool. There were larger forces at work, and Sam had just stumbled into a much larger conspiracy than she had ever imagined. We need to get to the control center, Lena continued, her eyes sharp. That's where they're coordinating everything. The leader's operation? It's part of something bigger, and we can't let them finish it. Sam nodded, her resolve solidifying. Let's do this. They rushed down the corridor, moving quickly but quietly, knowing that the longer they stayed in the compound, the more danger they were in. The guards would eventually regroup and track them down. But with Lena's help, they had a fighting chance. As they neared the control center, Sam's thoughts raced. The leader wasn't the end of this. He was just the beginning. Whoever was behind all this, whoever was pulling the strings, was still out there. And Sam was determined to bring them down, no matter what it took. The door to the control room was ahead, and Sam could feel the weight of what was coming. This would be their final confrontation, the moment when they either walked away victorious or faced the consequences of their actions. The door to the control room loomed ahead, the flickering red emergency lights casting a sinister glow on the metallic walls. Sam's heart pounded in her chest as they approached, Lena close behind her, both women focused and determined. Jack and Emma flanked them, ready for whatever was coming next. This was it, the final confrontation. No more games, no more distractions. It was time to take down the people behind this entire operation. Sam reached for the door handle, pausing for a moment to listen. The faint hum of machinery and the low murmur of voices on the other side told her that the room was occupied. They weren't alone. She nodded to Lena, signaling for the team to be ready. Then, with a swift motion, Sam yanked the door open. Inside, chaos erupted. The control room was a high-tech hub, filled with monitors and equipment that blinked with data. At the far end of the room, a group of men in tactical gear stood in front of a massive digital map which displayed various global hotspots. The mastermind behind the operation, a man Sam had never met but recognized instantly from the photos they had found, was in the center, flanked by several armed guards. "Welcome, Sam," the man said with a cold smile, his voice dripping with disdain. "I've been expecting you." Sam's eyes narrowed. "You're the one pulling the strings. All of this, it's been you from the start, hasn't it?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to one of his guards, who nodded and began tapping on a nearby keyboard. The monitors around the room flickered, and a map of global communications, military assets, and government operations appeared on the screen. "Everything you've uncovered is just a small piece of the puzzle," the man continued. "You're too late. My plan is already in motion." Sam's grip on her weapon tightened, but she didn't move. She needed to hear more. "What is your plan? What are you really trying to do?" The man stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with pride. "I'm not just trying to control a city, or even a country. I'm controlling the very systems that hold the world together: governments, economies, communications. You think you're fighting criminals? No, Sam. You're fighting an entire network. And now you're in it, too." Lena's voice cut through the tension, sharp and steady. "So, you're a puppet master. But who's pulling your strings? Who's behind this whole thing?" The man's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected that question. Then, with a shrug, he turned back to the monitors. "You'll never know. But it doesn't matter. By the time you figure it out, it'll be too late." Sam felt a surge of anger. This man thought he had one. He thought he had all the power, all the answers. But Sam wasn't going to let him get away with it. She had come too far, and too many lives had already been lost. "Then we'll make sure it's not too late," Sam said, her voice cold. Jack, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stepped forward. He'd had enough of the talking. Enough with the monologues. "We're taking you down now." He fired a shot at one of the guards, hitting him square in the chest. The room erupted into action as the remaining guards scrambled for cover. Sam and Lena immediately followed suit, firing at anyone who came into their sights. The mastermind, unfazed by the chaos, calmly stepped back behind his desk and pressed a button on his console. The screens in the room flickered and went dark for a moment before they flashed back to life. The map on the main screen now showed several red dots blinking in unison, each one representing a major city, a crucial infrastructure target, or a government facility. "This is it," the mastermind said, his voice almost triumphant. "I've already activated the protocols. The system is in motion. You can't stop it now." Sam's mind raced. He had already initiated something, a global plan that could bring entire governments to their knees. If he had control over these systems, there was no telling how much damage he could cause. But Sam wasn't about to give up. Not now. "Lena!" Sam shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to disable the system. Now." Lena didn't hesitate. She moved toward the control panel, expertly avoiding the gunfire as she worked her way around the room. Sam and Jack provided cover, taking down more of the guards. Emma was near the back, guarding their escape route in case they needed it. The mastermind's eyes narrowed. He wasn't about to let them destroy his plans so easily. He lunged for a hidden drawer in his desk and pulled out a device, a small remote with a glowing red button. "You think you're the only ones with power," he sneered. "Let's see how you handle this." Before anyone could react, he slammed his hand down on the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the entire room shook. The lights flickered, and a loud, mechanical whirring noise filled the air. A red emergency light flashed above them, casting everything in an ominous glow. "What did you do?" Sam shouted, her voice full of panic. The mastermind's grin grew even wider. "You're too late," he said. "I've just triggered the failsafe. Even if you kill me, you won't stop the launch sequence. My plan is already underway, and there's no going back." Sam's heart sank. The clock was ticking. They had moments, maybe seconds, before whatever this man had set in motion became irreversible. But she refused to give in. Not when they were this close. Lena reached the control panel just in time. She slammed her hand down on a series of buttons, but the system resisted. The screens flickered once more, and Lena cursed under her breath. "I can't override it. It's locked me out." Sam's mind raced. There had to be a way. She couldn't let this man win. Then, like a lightning bolt, an idea struck her. "Emma!" Sam shouted. "Get to the backup system. It's in the sublevel. Take the emergency ladder." Emma didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the door, her gun still in hand. Sam's heart pounded as she watched Emma disappear into the hallway, her only hope of stopping the countdown. The mastermind's smile faltered slightly as he watched Emma run. "You think one woman can stop me?" Sam didn't respond. She didn't need to. They weren't going to let him win. Emma reached the sublevel, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she ran down the corridor. She was almost there. The backup system was just ahead. But she wasn't alone. The mastermind's men had followed her. They were closing in. Would Emma make it in time to stop the countdown? Or would they all fall victim to the mastermind's twisted plan? The fate of the world was in her hands now. The hum of silence in the control room was deafening, broken only by the faint crackle of static from the destroyed monitors. The red emergency lights had dimmed, replaced by flickering fluorescence that cast a pale, uneasy glow. Sam, Lena, Jack, and Emma stood amidst the wreckage, bloodied but alive. The mastermind, now disarmed and unconscious on the floor, had finally been subdued. His failsafe, seconds from triggering chaos on a global scale, had been stopped thanks to Emma's quick thinking. The backup system in the sublevel had been destroyed in the nick of time, severing the connection that would have launched his devastating plan. Sam dropped to one knee, clutching her side where a stray bullet had grazed her earlier. "It's over," she murmured, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Lena crouched beside her, her hand resting briefly on Sam's shoulder. "It's over for now," she replied. "But this was just a piece of something bigger. We stopped him, but the people backing him, they're still out there." Sam nodded grimly. She knew Lena was right. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much larger fight. Jack leaned against the wall, his face pale but determined. "The authorities will want to know what happened here. If we don't move fast, they'll pin this whole thing on us." Lena smirked, pulling out a small drive from her pocket. "Already ahead of you. I downloaded everything we need, proof of what this guy was up to, and who he was working for. It won't take them long to connect the dots." Sam raised an eyebrow. "So, you're a hacker now, too?" "Let's just say I've picked up a few skills since we last worked together," Lena replied, a faint grin crossing her lips. Emma returned to the group, her face streaked with dirt but her eyes bright with triumph. "The backup system is toast," she said. "Whatever he was planning, it's done." Sam stood, despite the pain in her side, and looked at each of her teammates. "We did it," she said simply. "Together." For a moment, there was silence, a shared understanding of what they had accomplished and what it had cost. As they moved to leave the compound, Sam cast one last glance at the unconscious mastermind. His smug arrogance had crumbled in the face of their determination, but she knew there were others like him, hidden in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. And she would be ready. Sam stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the salty breeze brushing her face. The scars from the battle were still fresh, both on her body and in her mind. But for the first time in what felt like years, she allowed herself a moment of peace. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Lena approaching, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're not the type to take a break, are you?" Lena said, handing Sam a cup. Sam smiled faintly. "Not when there's still work to do." Lena leaned on the railing beside her. "I've been digging through the files we pulled from the compound. There's a name, a code name. Actually, Aegis. Whoever they are, they were funding everything he was doing. They're the real power behind this." Sam's jaw tightened. "And what do we know about them?" "Not much," Lena admitted. "But I know one thing. They didn't expect us to survive." Sam took a deep breath, the weight of the fight ahead settling on her shoulders. But she wasn't afraid. She had faced the darkness before, and she would do it again. This was her purpose. The fight against the mastermind was over, but the battle for justice was just beginning. Sam, Lena, Jack, and Emma had proven they were a force to be reckoned with. Fighters who wouldn't back down, no matter the odds. And somewhere, in the shadows, Aegis was watching. But this time, they wouldn't see Sam and her team coming. Because they were ready.